Chapter 181. Chen Weimao suddenly remembered this face. It was Wu Dun. She didn't recognize him just now because his expression was too surprised. Not as arrogant as when she first met him. Although she didn't understand why he reacted like this. Chen Weimao still obeyed and surrendered. This atmosphere was very strange. As if every soldier was conscientious. But the details were not rigorous. If she wanted to run, there would be many loopholes. Wu Dun took her and Feng Tan into a room alone. And the soldiers outside guarded the door. As soon as the door closed, Wu Dun suddenly spread his hands, stretched his neck and said speechlessly, "You really don't take the road to heaven. But you choose to go to hell. Fortunately, you met me. What are you talking about?" Chen Weimao suddenly felt that he was a bit familiar. It seemed that they only met once during the competition. But now he felt a bit like a European ruler. "Why did you ask me to come? I am just sailing normally in the Interstellar. Does the Federation have to intervene? Don't you know that some military regions will voluntarily take over your weapons if they meet you?" Chen Weimao thought it was something else. "How do you want to recruit me?" Wu Dun was suddenly speechless. And he turned his hands and pointed at himself. "Can't you see that I'm helping you?" "I can see it." Chen Weimao failed to hold back his laughter. "I just think it's funny. You guys don't know what those are and want to take them away. Aren't you afraid that you can't catch them?" Wu Dun's expression was a little embarrassed. And he wanted to refute subconsciously. But he also felt embarrassed. Not only him. Many people have seen the battlefield video of Chen Weimao supporting Eichnick. To be honest, they are not sure what kind of weapon it is. But they just think that powerful things should belong to the Federation. However, it seems that they have forgotten the treatment and experience that the person involved had suffered in the Federation. As if they had already made peace. Colonel Meng has a good relationship with her. Which means that the Federation has a good relationship with her. So everything is as it should be. Anyway, you are lucky to meet me today. I am not greedy, and don't want other people's things. He stood up hard to make himself look less embarrassed. "Oh. Then. Thank you." Chen Weimao pursed his lips, not wanting to spoil his fun. "Then how are you going to let me go? After some friendly negotiations, you came out in a hurry, and didn't carry large weapons with you. Let's just let it go this time." Chen Weimao nodded slightly, and looked at Feng Tan. He looked at the empty corner of the room with disdain. "Well, I ask you something. If you know, I give you something else later. Don't try to spy on our federal military affairs. I don't want to hear anything you tell me. What do you want to ask? Have you heard of the Pasa Islands?" Wu Dun thought about it, and seemed to have seen these words in his memory. The hometown of the demigod tribe? Yes. But in fact, it is just a different evolutionary direction that gives them the ability to use their own magnetic field. They are not gods. Chen Weimao sat down and relaxed as if this was her territory. She didn't have a very good impression of Wu Dun. But because of their unpleasant first time together, Wu Dun told her wholeheartedly that he was not a person who could hide things. So today, she didn't believe that Wu Dun was saying one thing to her in front of her, and another behind her back. In addition, she and Feng Tan, plus Leech, didn't take this team of federal soldiers seriously. 3 months ago, all the creatures on Vincia were destroyed. And the deaths were tragic. It was discovered by soldiers of the Federation who were on a mission outside. Otherwise, it would take who knows how long it would take for such an isolated planet to be discovered. How do you know? Why do you suddenly mention this? Is it related to Pasa? Almost all of them died because of the boiling energy in their bodies, which made the individuals like volcanic craters, and their bodies were torn into pieces. And the demigods of the Pasa Islands can adjust and change the human body's magnetic field. The advantage is that it is easy to move and can treat diseases. But the threat is difficult to estimate. Why are you telling me this? Wu Dun finally showed some caution. This matter was not widely circulated in the Federal Army, because Watia Star only interacted with the 3 military regions before, which caused some dissatisfaction in other military regions. Over time, no one was willing to get involved in their affairs. So even if this happened this time, the Federation did not pay much attention to this delicate semi-alliance country, and did not even send many people to investigate. Do you know why Vincia and the Federation are at odds? You know this again? Many people know this, but they keep it to themselves and don't talk about it. A long time ago, Vincia experienced a serious technical isolation, and internal problems affected its connection with the outside world. At that time, the Federation chose to turn a blind eye, and the 3 military regions just happened to be active nearby and needed support. so they had to exchange resources nearby. Vinsha was a starving camel that was bigger than a horse. After enduring that period, it gradually recovered its former prosperity. But its exchanges with the Federation also decreased a lot. Qin Weimao was too lazy to play dumb with Wu Dun. So he said directly, the military-industrial exchange between the 3rd Military Region and Vinsha was forced to be interrupted. And they are secretly investigating it. Don't you want to take advantage of it? You are overreaching. Wu Dun's face turned cold. It's not good for you to meddle too much in our internal affairs of the Federation. He didn't know how Qin Weimao knew these things. And he didn't know much about the affairs of the 3rd Military Region. But anyway, this shouldn't be the case. The military and technical exchanges of the Federation should be very cautious and confidential. So I know about this from the outside. What do you think is wrong? Qin Weimao also knew his concerns. So she only needed to show all her cards. And she didn't need to add fuel to the fire for the rest. Wu Dun had a bad expression and had nothing to say. After Qin Weimao said that, he couldn't just sit back and watch. He was being manipulated. 3 years ago, he couldn't beat him. But now, he couldn't resist after a few words. No wonder Colonel Ming. He stood up suddenly, turned around anxiously, and glared at Qin Weimao fiercely. Who else have you told about this? No. Only you. If you let me go, I will give you a credit. When I am free, I will send you some foreign weapons. Don't bribe me. Wu Dun interrupted her angrily. I just came out to take students for a stroll. But I took a job? You are really. It's settled. Qin Weimao grabbed Wu Dun's hand and forced him to shake hands and make peace, regardless of whether he was willing or not. But before he could let go, a roar that almost covered the entire planet seemed to be heard in the air. The alert was raised everywhere. The mature soldiers were a little bit overwhelmed at first with the team of students. But everyone got into the state immediately. Another aircraft with a fire at the tail fell straight down. It seemed that there was no danger. Many people entered the Mecca and stared at this rag that was very difficult to start. After waiting for a long time, they finally waited for a little movement. 3 people came out of the cabin and couldn't stand steadily. Meng? Colonel Meng? Colonel Xiao? The people around recognized them and immediately pointed their guns downwards. Where's Wu Dun? Meng Leji asked directly. Inside. He pushed the door open and looked at Feng Tan at first sight. Someone fainted in the room, and Wu Dun was unsteady on his feet, covering his head with his temples bulging with veins. Colonel. Wait a minute. Qin Weimao picked up Feng Tan and looked up at Meng Leji blankly. She didn't think Meng Leji's appearance was unexpected, but she didn't expect him to come so quickly. When she saw Ai Xinghe in the student team just now, she immediately signaled the young student not to show that they knew each other. Moreover, she knew that Ai Xinghe was not someone who would sit back and do nothing, and she would definitely contact Meng Leji. Well, let the Federation's own people solve the Federation's troubles. But she didn't expect Meng Leji to come and make such a big noise. Qin Weimao's face was held by both hands and rubbed vigorously. You? What can I say about you? Are your injuries healed? Meng Leji didn't say a word of the complaints he had made up along the way. He forced his way through 3 wormholes, and the aircraft couldn't stand it, and finally fell to the ground half out of control. What did you do to them? None of their business, Qin Weimao muttered, and realized what happened, and hurried to help them excuse themselves. He too? Meng Leji raised his head and gently tapped the dizzy Feng Tan with his chin. He is. Qin Weimao couldn't think of any convincing reason for a while, so he had to look at Xiao Duan for help. Colonel, let's get down to business first. Xiao Duan immediately understood. He couldn't do what Meng Leji did, and he had already adjusted his mentality and couldn't interfere too much in the federal military. Now he could only pretend to be a stranger. He supported Wu Dun, and after feeling Meng Leji's withdrawal of mental interference, he said to him in a deep voice, this time, he wanted to let me go. Qin Weimao spoke at the right time. Really? Wu Dun didn't say a word, and it was an unexpected disaster. When his mind was not so confused, he came back to his senses. Colonel Meng's current style of behavior is different from before? People are constantly growing. You have degenerated. Wu Dun spat at him mercilessly, looking at Feng Tan who fainted beside him. He pursed his lips in sympathy. I don't know what the situation is with these people, but it seems that Meng Leji is quite polite to me. Don't think you are the only one who is sober and rational. Wu Dun didn't want to express his dissatisfaction directly, so he just said it briefly. You came at the right time. If someone says that I let them win, I can still drag you down as a scapegoat. Okay. Meng Liji spoke briefly and took 2 steps towards him. He hesitated to speak, just patted his shoulder, and then went out to repair the spaceship. Wu Dun used a lot of materials before they repaired it and left. Wu Dun looked at the light spot that disappeared from his sight and rubbed his nose gently. That soldier. Come here. Ai Xing pretended to be calm and followed him. Do you know Chen Weima? Many people in the Federation should know her. Don't pretend with me. Wu Dun stood with his back to her and his hands on his waist. He stood on a high place and looked at the mess left by Meng Liji. But he was not angry. So many people were either curious or didn't know what to do when they saw Chen Weima. Only you showed different emotions. Ai Xing didn't want to lie. But he didn't want to admit it either. Just say what you need to say. I don't want to blame you. You called Meng Liji here and saved me a lot of trouble. Wu Dun's tone softened. Ai Xing's reaction was equivalent to confessing. How did you meet? When? More than 2 years ago. My 2 younger brothers were killed by Freedom Technology because of human body modification. Wu Dun was silent for a moment. He had never carried out any mission related to Freedom Technology. But he knew about the incident that this group of people had done in the independent military region. The other party has been so arrogant. But the Federation still did not vigorously encircle and suppress them. He did not understand. Nor did he want to understand. Chen Weima found something for me to do. It has nothing to do with our second core. But I want to go. Ai Xing looked confused. What's the point of telling her about this? But I am not very familiar with her. I just think that regardless of her character, she will not easily make fun of us for Meng Liji's sake. Wu Dun turned and looked into her eyes. I know that even if she doesn't tell me, she will find a way to instigate other federal officers. I don't understand what she wants to do. But I can still see her little thoughts of watching the fire from the other side and reaping the benefits of the fishermen. What does the colonel need me to do? Send a message when the time comes. And you keep your mouth shut. Chapter 182. A long queue formed at the ship port under construction above Vincia. Groups of strong young men stepped down from the spacecraft with the Federation logo. It's not as backward as the Federation said. I think this is good. A young man who just came down looked up at the various robots in the air that were automatically manufacturing various large-scale defense devices in full swing, and couldn't help but sigh. The work here is still quite easy. It's mainly because it's too far away from the Federation and the technical content is not high. So the price is relatively high when recruiting. The young man who came to meet them explained. I thought the environment was so bad. It's good. The young man felt very satisfied. And this trip was not in vain. The Federation officially recruited laborers to go to Vincia, saying that it was to help with post-war construction and reconstruction. But everyone knew that there were no indigenous people there. The Federation people went there just to occupy the land. And this place will belong to the Federation in the future. It's like the Federation is paying to attract young people to live there. It's a good place. I don't know why it's empty. The young man sighed as he walked. I heard it from others, too. The young man leading the way suddenly slowed down and came close to him and whispered. I heard that the battle was very fierce before. And those who came early caught up with the last wave of the war. Do you know Chen Weima? Yes. There are a lot of gossips about her on the Star Network. What's the matter? She seems to have died here. Really? The young man was also excited when he heard it. And he couldn't help but lower his voice. But he couldn't hide his excitement. Tell me. Tell me. Didn't she leave the Federation a long time ago? How did she come here? I don't know the details. It seems that she escaped here with injuries. Caught up with the fight here. Helped a little. Got involved. And was killed in the explosion. Ah? The young man felt a little strange. And a little careless in his heart. There are many versions of Chen Weima's story on the Star Network. It is generally recognized that she is a cold-faced and ruthless beauty who seems to be difficult to kill. Then what? He asked. Then it's like this now. The leader spread his hands, indicating that he only knew this much. But I heard from a soldier friend that Colonel Meng Liji disappeared after he knew about this. What happened? Don't you know? Colonel Meng has already fallen in love with her. I guessed it. The young man looked like he had guessed it a long time ago. Otherwise, why would he be so nice to a foreigner? I guess he must have been heartbroken because his lover died. So he quit and ran away. What you said is very likely. The young man was immersed in the secret joy of eating melons all the way. And his worries about the new life were diluted a lot. You just mentioned the gossip about Chen Weimao on the Star Network. What else? The guide had been following behind and asked suddenly. Just the previous ones. You haven't seen them? I've been out there for a long time. And there are still many things I haven't seen and lost. You should have told me earlier. I would have shared it with you. He generously slid the light brain and transmitted it without a trace. Thanks. It's okay. We live here from now on. Maybe we work in the same place. Are you alone too? My wife is here too. But she's not in good health. Luckily the Federation allows me to bring her along. Oh, that's not bad. The young man came here because his family wasn't rich. And it sounded like the treatment here was really good. Not a rip-off. Okay. I should go. Let's have dinner together when we have time. Definitely. At the fork in the road. The young man went to his residence by himself. And the guide looked at his back coldly. Tapped a few times on the light brain with an expressionless face. And another darknet line disappeared from the starnet. His residence is at the foot of the mountain. Quite remote. To get there from the shipport, you need to take a flying bus, transfer to a suspended platform, and then walk for an hour. The foot of the mountain is not a flat open space. There are many rugged purple-brown ghost claw trees growing in the potholes. You can only see a small house if you go deeper. In the quiet forest, only there can be bursts of knocking sounds. My weak wife is swinging a hammer again. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Chen Weimao wearing a safety mask. One hand was wrapped, and the other hand was holding a half-human-length repair machine, aiming at a very small object while smashing and firing a small laser. My husband who works hard for the family is back? Chen Weimao threw away the things, took off the mask and took a long breath. It's been a few months. Why are you still so resentful of this character? Meng Leji smiled and pressed the first button on his clothes, and the ordinary work clothes were immediately transformed into combat clothes. Occasionally, I also want to experience the feeling of deceiving others with my mental power. Chen Weimao raised her head slightly and deliberately ridiculed. But the other party smiled more deeply, pecked her mouth lightly, and took her injured hand again. Don't mess around just because the injury on your hand doesn't hinder your walking. I've got a solution. Chen Weimao's eyes lit up when she said this. A strong attack will only backfire. So let it eat me. Is there a method with a theoretical basis? No. But you can give it a try. Meng Leji didn't respond, but just gently rubbed her wound twice. Xiao Duan will come later. It's his first time here. Will you receive him? No. You talk. I go and knock that thing down first. Nothing she said could suppress her fighting spirit. An hour later, Xiao Duan entered the interior of the cliff through the entrance of the basement of the house. The space inside was huge, with few signs of human excavation. Or in other words, it was formed a long time ago. As soon as he entered the core area, he was blinded by a dazzling light. After adapting, he could see clearly what it was. A very regular ball of light, with blurred edges and surrounding air. Everyone in the cave was concentrating on the ball of light, and no one took the initiative to talk to him. Just as he was about to talk to Meng Leji, the ball of light suddenly shook slightly. It seemed that there was no change on the surface, but a shadow emerged in a very ethereal form. And then the whole body was ejected. Chen Weimao grabbed a half-head-like thing with horns and glowing blue light with one hand, lying on the ground with her back half up, unable to speak a word, just breathing heavily. The people around her tacitly carried things like spray guns and rushed towards her. It was also impossible to tell what the gaseous substance was. Chen Weimao's originally light blue combat uniform gradually turned light silver. Without letting anyone touch her, Chen Weimao crawled to the wall in a panic and leaned against the corner. The things she brought out were placed in the isolation chamber by several people for temporary testing. She said it was a scientific survey. Is this the way? Xiao Duan approached Meng Leji and asked as he looked at the situation. That was 3 months ago. And it was indeed a normal exploration. Meng Leji replied. It's a bit dangerous as an exploration behavior now. Is this the consciousness mixed body? Yes. Then how did she get in as a physical body? And it was as if she had gone through a fierce battle? After Chen Weimao's second fake death, the cooperation between Vincha and the Federation was restarted. And Wu Dun from the 2nd Military District and Meng Leji from the Independent Military District were jointly responsible, leaving the 3rd Military District behind, because the original project was to highly purify energy. But when we got here, it turned into this weird thing. In the end, it was considered that the 3rd Military District failed to supervise and others had to make up for it. To put it simply, everything can be considered a kind of energy. But energies of different dimensions cannot cross-affect substances of other dimensions in most cases. And some non-physical things are also invisible and intangible energies, such as consciousness, Mengleji explained. Like the spiritual power of the two of us, the energy is strong enough to affect other substances. And this consciousness mixture is a combination of energy. Is this made by the Pasa people? Xiao Duan knew that the apparent opponent of this sudden battle was the Pasa Islands. But in reality, it was against Freedom Technology. But he had also heard about the abilities of the Pasa people. The magnetic field could have a big or small impact on energy. And the interference with consciousness might be more significant than their mental power. It's their contribution. But this achievement was made by Freedom Technology. Mengleji squatted down and touched Chen Weimo's face. The other party seemed to have no reaction, and his eyes were a little empty. He continued, "The difficulty now is that if you want to get the innermost things, you must break through the outer layer. And the outer layer of energy is a lot of consciousness. They have already formed their own world under the influence of the magnetic field. A latitude between the real thing and the illusion. So she can go in too. Xiao Duan has realized his role. Then we can use ideology to fight against the things inside. That's about it. But you are now. You have recovered a lot. Colonel. Don't worry. Natalia gave you all the particle machines to treat diseases. So of course there must be progress." Chen Weimo suddenly spoke. She has not yet recovered her perception of the normal world. When she looks at people now, it's like looking through a layer of foggy water mirror. And she can't see clearly. And she doesn't look like a human. The image is constantly rippling. And even the sound seems to have a physical path of fluctuations. "Are you okay?" Mengleji tried to find her eyes and make eye contact. But she seemed not to receive the signal. Fortunately, it's not a big problem. Just a little dizzy. It's not completely solved inside. I go in again later. No feeling? What? Chen Weimo looked around and found that her injured hand was slightly deformed. But she had been cushioning it under her legs just now and didn't notice it. "You can't go again." Mengleji stood up and was about to pack up when a few more people came in. "Look! Is this the person?" The middle-aged woman in the lead was very capable. "Is this?" Xiao Duan asked quietly. "Hello. I'm Zhu Jia, the head of Federation Hongling Energy." She took the initiative to extend her hand to Xiao Duan. Yi Rani Xian's mother. Mengleji quietly connected Xiao Duan's perception. In order to prevent leaks and related people's intervention. They even chose their own people for energy backup. "Auntie, why are you here?" Mengleji stepped forward, still a little surprised by the familiar face tied up behind him. "Where did you find him?" "I went to all the possible locations that Weimo gave me." Zhu Jia also squatted down to look at Chen Weimo's condition. "You young people are always hesitating and afraid of this and that, which is really a waste of time. I will lead the team to rush forward. And this kind of thing is still. Okay. You guys do your business and don't bother me." She sat beside Chen Weimo, looking like she couldn't hear anything. Xiao Duan just felt that the man looked familiar. And after looking at him for a long time, he finally remembered. This was a person who had appeared in the public declaration of free technology. Lu Xue. Chapter 183. Lu Xue used to be the second-in-command engineer of Grayrel. His greatest contribution was to integrate and transform the resources obtained from various places, turning them into something that could only be used in their independent system. Even if others took them away, they would not be of much use. Later, Grayrel's faction fell, and Lu Xue disappeared. But the last time he was found, or the latest reappearance of his achievements, was in the energy storage system of the warehouse for mass-transformed people. So he was still working hard for Freedom Technology. And it was very likely that he was on Shaifai's side from the beginning. Let him stay here first. We go in first. Mengleji just wanted to finish today's progress quickly, especially after seeing Chen Weimo suddenly bleed from the nose again. It was not difficult to get in, as long as you endure the feeling of suffocating in a sticky liquid at the beginning. It will be very similar to a normal space later, but it looks boundless and full of pink light. As soon as they entered, they saw a monster with only half a head lying on the ground. It seemed to be dead, and its blood floated upwards like a wisp of green smoke. What is this place? It can be understood as a gap between several dimensions of space. So there are no physical rules to refer to. Mengleji gently touched the dead creature with his foot, and it immediately flew far away. Sometimes, if you hit it hard, you will get hurt instead. If you let it devour you, it may be the one that explodes and dies. Are we coming in to get the core? Xiao Duan asked. He tried not to interact with the scene here to avoid getting into trouble. As soon as he came in, he felt a familiar energy here, which was from leeches. Perhaps the leeches took a fancy to the energy here and used it as food. Its semi-fusion and erosion with this place actually gave Mengleji and his team a lot of time and opportunities to explore. Going further in is the extraction of consciousness, which will interfere with mental power a little. But the mental power of the two of us is different from that of the Federation. So we use our abilities to try to control and understand the specific content of consciousness. At first, no one knew what was in this space. Mengleji only explored a few of them. Before he could find the rest, all the strange creatures were activated. For a few months, ordinary federal soldiers usually came in at a disadvantage. The cost of restoring mental power was too high. Shen Weima felt it was not worth it, so he simply did everything himself. It was not until recently that he almost cleaned it up. Xiao Duan listened to Mengleji's words and immediately focused his attention. However, as soon as he felt the consciousness approaching, his brain felt a pain that was tightened rapidly, and his feet seemed to be standing on 1,000 voids. Looks like you've recovered well. Mengleji patted his shoulder and was not too nervous. Only normal people would have this kind of reaction. In Mengleji's spiritual world, even those consciousnesses without entities don't want to get close. So he was not affected much. Here are all the consciousnesses of the Vincia people? No, not all of them. Xiao Duan endured the pain and tried his best to do what Mengleji said. It was strange that the consciousnesses here came from all over the world before they died. But now they are all trapped here. The only thing they have in common is that they were more or less different from normal people when they were alive. And it was precisely because of this that they were chosen and brought here. They call this evolution. But it is actually just a kind of spiritual energy similar to mental power. And it is still very elementary. Mengleji explained. Freedom Technology found that their utilization value was not high. So they extracted their consciousness and semi-materialized it to be used as a protective layer for this ball. What is inside that requires so many lives to cover it up? I don't know. In their opinion, ordinary people are not valuable and are inexhaustible. So it is reasonable for them to serve as a stepping stone for their more valuable research. But there are no Federation people here. Even if there are one or two, they have already left the Federation. Mengleji didn't say anything more. Xiao Duan already understood. Most of the backbones of Freedom Technology escaped from the Federation. Their own people always know their own people best. They avoided the Federation and knew that the Federation would not meddle in other countries' affairs without interference of interests. In this way, they saved themselves a lot of trouble. Facts have proved that the Federation did not only carry out a devastating blow to Grayler's provocation, but Xia Fei's group fled far away and changed their appearance. And the Federation did not pursue them anymore, because they were no longer killing Federation people. Xiao Duan was not too surprised. He had already thought about it. And people with different ideologies could not work together. He did not have time to think too much at the moment. Every time he and Mengleji advanced a little bit, the energy of the leeches in this space would be eroded a little bit, and their retreat would become narrower. Don't be too nervous. Mengleji seemed to sense his tension and said, the leech will not threaten us for the time being. It's like a big fish eating a small fish. It won't leave the small fish alone and goes straight for the shrimp. What if this mass of consciousness is almost swallowed by it? Xiao Duan saw Mengleji's cold face and suddenly pulled the corner of his mouth helplessly. And he understood. It doesn't matter. Shen Weima will continue to find it the same kind or a better food source. He comforted himself. It was trivial but not difficult to peel off the weak energy consciousness layer by layer. It didn't take too much energy for the two of them. When the core area was gradually exposed, Xiao Duan immediately felt a strong suction. Mengleji used his mental power to protect Xiao Duan a little bit, and took out another small ball. The small ball automatically unfolded in his palm, splitting into many small flying balls, all of which fell into the empty area in front of him, forming a spherical chain array. He felt Xia Fei's consciousness, but there were still many impurities. To be precise, it was not consciousness and spiritual energy, but a physical object. The newly developed consciousness blocker he brought with him was not so effective at first. But with the physical object as support, it doubled its effect. The stronger the outside is, the easier it will be to take down the inside. The uncontrollable monster formed by the outer consciousness and the entity has been fighting for several months. And it was detained here in an instant. When they went out, the light ball suddenly dissipated a lot, and the edges dimmed. The leech quickly began to devour the remaining part. Wu Dun arrived just in time. Exhausted. Finally, he was surprised to see Xiao Duan, who had disappeared for a long time. But this operation was a cooperation between the two military regions, and he couldn't make a fuss in person, so he could only pretend to be very calm and decent. Almost. Let's analyze the ingredients first. Meng Liji glanced at Chen Weimo in the corner. She had fallen asleep. Zhu Jia was accompanying her. He looked at the person in front of him again. Again attacked? Yeah. I'm used to it. Since Wu Dun got involved in the affairs here. Meng Liji was in charge of the interior, and he was in charge of the outer defense and reconstruction. Every few days, someone came to invade in a small spaceship. Occasionally, there were larger scales that were not easy to deal with, but he could handle them. As time went by, he became more and more curious about what was hidden inside. Take a look quickly. I can't fight so many senseless battles for nothing. It shouldn't be too complicated. But? Meng Liji walked to his side and patted his shoulder. Don't hold your hopes too high. What do you mean? Meng Liji didn't answer, but just picked up Chen Weimo and left the cave. It wasn't until late at night that Chen Weimo woke up. She was already in the big bed at home, and Meng Liji was still awake beside her. She blinked her eyes and tried to regain her consciousness, but before her soul could return to its place, she was overwhelmed again. Breathe, Meng Liji kindly reminded. I'm not awake yet, and I can't react. The other person laughed softly, with a hint of teasing. In there, Chen Weimo was fully awake and immediately asked about the business. It's Sha Fei's consciousness, but it should be a failed version. Failed? Is she crazy? That's not the case. Meng Liji turned over and lay on his stomach. As far as we know, she is pursuing the upgrade of consciousness and trying to interact with external objects. What she wants is not to leave her body and become a spiritual body. So the things here are her attempts. But they failed. How did it fail? She should have used the magnetic field of the Pasa people to semi-materialize her copied consciousness and combined it with the magnetic liquid metal in the core of a general planet. However, such consciousness was no longer Sha Fei's will. The form thing had a strong suction force and was only targeted at the level of spiritual perception. So it was a kind of spiritual weapon that was not under her control. It can be said that she should have looked down on it. But since she kept it, if she didn't want to use it on civilians, then someone around her wanted to keep it for their own use. Chen Weimo tilted her head and rested it on her arm. Squeezing out a long string of words from her throat, asked Lin Qianxing. Are you still in contact with him? Meng Liji suddenly stood up. No. Find it now. She turned over and lay flat, looking at the empty ceiling, and said lightly, if there is a problem, find a solution. After solving it, there will be new problems. I have been pushed around all the time, and I am a little numb. Meng Liji looked at her profile, his eyes flickering slightly. This model will not and cannot continue to treat the symptoms, but not the root cause. Chen Weimo just turned his head and remained silent. But when their eyes met, they both smiled bitterly. Just as she was about to stand up, she was circled again. I've always wanted to ask why you only decided on this with him. Not to mention me. Even Gu Wenzhou didn't know. Chen Weimo touched her nose and didn't dare to look at him. It's not just him. Su Xiaoxiao also knows. Xiao Duan also knows. There was a silence in the room. She quickly made up for it. Su Xiaoxiao is because she is also a spiritual body. She can help me hide it from Imosila. Xiao Duan is half an outsider. Freedom Technology doesn't pay much attention to him. Lin Qianxing is because he also has his own purpose. We hit it off. Hit it off right away. Meng Liji laughed again with an unknown meaning, and tightened his arms around her. I really underestimated your cooperation. Colonel Meng, don't be jealous of others for no reason. I'm jealous? He almost laughed out loud. Chen Weimo sucked his lower lip, feeling it was soft, and gently touched it with the tip of her tongue. He is sometimes neurotic. I have advised him for a long time, but he just complicates simple problems. Meng Liji didn't understand what she said for a moment, and was stunned for a moment. Then he remembered something. Can he? Chapter 184. Lu Shuo was locked in a dim room, and he had lost his sense of time. A group of people were messing around with the achievements of freedom technology in front of him without any scruples. No one asked him anything. He was left to watch for a while. And then, he was locked up here. He didn't even have a particularly strict shackle on him. He had heard long ago that Colonel Mengliji of the Federation could interrogate people effortlessly. And his mental power could directly control the prisoners to passively say everything he wanted. When Luzhua was captured, he was ready to die. A keyword-triggering explosion device was also placed in his brain because he knew too much. After freedom technology gradually fell apart and Shafei became the only one in power, he knew that he was not far from death, no matter who died. But Mengliji never came. In the endless waiting with food and drink, he finally appeared in front of him. Many people in freedom technology want to experience the state of being controlled by the Colonel. I didn't expect that I was luckier than others and can experience it now. Luzhua smiled bitterly. This was probably the only thing worth being happy about before he died. Mengliji said nothing. But through a palm-sized screen, he carried with him to him. Luzhua caught it awkwardly. The image on the screen was a very detailed structure diagram of the human brain. Healthy and normal. This is. He could not see anything unusual, and did not know the other party's intention. This is your brain, Mengliji said. We have developed a micro-instrument that can remove the sensor in the brain without opening the skull or complex artificial technology. It will be mixed in your diet for the next few days. Not bad. You succeeded. Luzhua didn't know what to say. He had studied how to get the thing out privately, but he was not specialized in this area, and he couldn't find anyone he completely trusted to help him. I didn't expect that they would help me get it out. What do you want to know? He got straight to the point. If he survived now, even if he didn't say anything, he would be considered a betrayer by the outside world. He had no way to survive outside. It's better to ask directly. Maybe you can get another way to make a living. Do you know why we have to help you remove it? Mengliji asked back. The cost of removing a sensor from a nerve is enough to build a half battleship. It's generally not worth it to use it on you. Luzhua looked at him in a daze, unable to say a word. Mengliji continued, when you were sent here, your fate was the same as other people from freedom technology. But after I came out of that consciousness mixture, I found that I needed your help. Luzhua's mouth twitched bitterly. As expected, he was going to make the best use of his resources, you say? I met a woman in that pile of consciousness. She was from Noya. She had lived for more than 20 years, and had never left this planet. Half a year ago, she used half of her life's belongings to exchange for an opportunity to travel to the stars. The destination was WO90. But she was accidentally sent here. Luzhua's face gradually lost its luster. His eyes turned from self-mockery to confusion. And his throat was hoarse, and he couldn't make a sound. Mengliji looked at his reaction and lowered his eyes to the ground. It's good that you know him. Otherwise, I can't convey the message, and I always feel like I have broken my promise. What did she say? When Luzhua said this, he was shocked. It was such a strange voice. She wanted me to help figure out where she was on the spaceship. Why she became like this. She met so many strange people. Can she change back? Luzhua's shoulders drooped completely. You know what you are doing at Freedom Technology better than me. You also know what you can and can't do. I have something to do. So I leave first. If you have anything to say, just raise your hand, and someone will come to take you out. Mengliji turned and walked out, not wanting to say a word more. One sentence can change a person's life, and language is very important. Wu Dun was waiting for Mengliji at the door, while attacking his hard work. He can't go back. Smart people can only cooperate. Why are you avoiding the important point? Mengliji didn't really want to talk about this topic. He skillfully dismissed Wu Dun. When you are outside, do you still receive that string of strange signals? Speaking of this, Wu Dun was annoyed. I have to catch this guy. Don't worry. I have drawn a rough area. And the signal he sends will only be within this range. I want to see who is so bored that he does such boring things every day. Mengliji chuckled and pressed his shoulder, saying nothing. Xiao Duan and Chen Weimo's spaceship was still waiting for him outside. He has been living here for several months. Every day when he is outside, he controls others to have hallucinations, so that they will not recognize him. In addition to secretly detecting whether the Federation will do something here, it is also to spread some rumors. Now that the light ball was finally dealt with, he could leave without any worries. Zhu Jia was pacing back and forth not far from the spaceship. And, do you have something to ask me? Mengliji took the initiative to step forward. Zhu Jia always said what she wanted to say. But today she was a little hesitant. Do you want to ask each one? She sighed. supporting her waist with one hand, her expression a little embarrassed. This child is very stubborn. Although Iran is usually more assertive, and Ishwan doesn't seem to have any ideas. She cares about many things in her heart, and is prouder than anyone else. If it weren't for the medicines and treatments that Wei Ma brought, who knows what would have happened to the injury. Meng Liji listened quietly. The elders sometimes couldn't tell their closest people what they had in their hearts, so they had to tell anyone they could. But now it's better. She can stand up and walk, although she can't recover to normal. She choked up when she said this, and then recovered as usual. Actually, I want to say something today. Don't blame me for being nosy. Just say it directly. Zhu Jia breathed a sigh of relief. I have never really understood cyborgs. I only knew a little about them because of Iran Ishwan. To be honest, I investigated them out of fear. Meng Liji was silent and said, it's good that you can say that. After understanding them, I think they are indeed different from normal people. Their emotions and nerves are partially castrated. Many people are liberated or restored to the function of this area after being damaged again. What do you want to say? I want to say. Zhu Jia finally gathered up the courage. In fact, I have also met several cyborgs. Compared with him, Wei Ma is too much like a normal person. I heard Ishwan say that she later underwent several transformations. Maybe it was because of this reason. Or maybe it was because the trauma she suffered was too frequent and severe. Meng Liji took over her words and said, Zhu Jia's eyes were more reluctant. Until now, there is no clear record of how long a cyborg can live. Wei Ma, you have seen it. Even if it is due to the influence of various consciousnesses and unknown energies, her condition is not right. The coldness spread in the air, and Meng Liji did not respond. Thank you, Auntie. Don't keep saying polite things to me. I know no one dares to tell you. But there must be many people who have thought about this problem in their hearts. People have a lifespan, and objects have a shelf life. She is no exception. Patching is not a solution. Zhu Jia actually regretted bringing up this topic today. But someone has to face it. So it's better to let her be the bad guy. I know it in my heart. Don't worry. Meng Liji comforted her in return. That's good. I help you watch over here. Tell me if you need anything. Thank you, Auntie. Oh, I told you to stop being so polite. Shen Weimao leaned on the window, watching Meng Liji and Zhu Jia talking outside. Are you sure that was the signal sent by Gu Wenzhou? Xiao Duan was looking at Wu Dun's signal record history, and couldn't see anything special at all. Chen Weimao turned around with disgust, seemingly pointing at the garbled code casually, but his finger found a string of numbers very accurately. This segment is repeated many times. You can see that there are 5 or 6 spaces before and after each segment, and then they are connected together. Xiao Duan followed the thread. Pai Kuai Lai? What is this? Gu Wenzhou once thought of a code word. This fixed rule can have countless variations. It is just right for signals. Genius. But unnecessary. Xiao Duan suddenly felt that he had been insulted in some subtle way after studying for a long time. He may still be angry now. Chen Weimao rested his head on his arm and said helplessly, after all, we kept it a secret from him. Is Su Xiaoxiao with him? Is it okay? She split herself into 2 parts. One part was used to block Mozilla's temptation to us, and the other part remained outside in human form. Her energy has been weakened a lot, and even if she and Gu Wenzhou don't get along, she won't be a problem. Why? She looks down on you and has no use value. You are really outspoken. Chen Weimao turned over completely, half lying on the low platform in front of the window, looking at the ceiling and muttering, I really don't know what he is doing these days. Aren't you afraid that he is not what you imagined? She tilted her head and glanced at Xiao Duan. What else can he do? Everything he has is destroyed. Family. Friends. He can only go down this path until the end. Xiao Duan thought this was unpleasant to hear, but it was true. If you can really meet him, do you want to go to Serlin together? No. I want to go back to the new planet of Tilts for a while. Then, Colonel Meng? He wanted to ask what to do with the progress he had found, but he felt it was unnecessary. Many things can't be rushed, and if they rush around now, it will easily alert the enemy. He can go too. Anyway, I'm dead now, and he's missing. Chen Weimao gave Xiao Duan a thumbs up. Natalia, please help me put in a good word. What about me? Xiao Duan felt something was strange, but Chen Weimao closed his eyes and didn't give him a chance to speak. Tilts, You can go back. Now that the whole country has moved there not long ago. There are still many things that have not been settled. Chen Weimao can also support Natalia when he goes there. They have been separated for a long time. And Ir chose to stay on the old planet to accompany the rest of the leech. Xiao Duan thought about it, but suddenly found that he missed someone. Chapter 185. Chen Weimao has always admired Natalia's vision. Many monarchs would expand their territory. But Natalia's selection must be a treasure land with perfect weather and location. The terrain of Tilt's new planet is very similar to the original one. And the climate, vegetation, and resources are even better. Perhaps because Chen Weimao has no concept of hometown. She can't understand the ideas of those who oppose it. But Meng Leji said that except for some people who are guilty and afraid of being found out during the withdrawal, most of them still have a sense of belonging to their hometown, which makes them not want to leave. Maybe, Chen Weimao thought. But now everyone is living well here, because the quality of life has improved instead of decreased. She went back and forth to work in the valley of the new planet as usual. But it was different from before. There was no plant cover here, and it was black sand everywhere. All the traces of human beings were very obvious. From the pictures transmitted from high altitude, it looked lonely. She was still doing the same work of exploration and mining as before. But she was unfamiliar with the place. And in the open land, unusual noises came one after another. The underground gas in the newly mined area is unknown. Let's send the robot down to explore first. Don't move. Xiao Duan ran out of the control room and ran to the scene. He passed through layers of fully armed soldiers and found Chen Weimao, the leader of the team. The signal of the advanced detector flickers, and the scanning results are more and more general as they go down. Maybe some media will interfere with the signal. Chen Weimao was not sure either. It was all guesswork based on previous experience. She looked back at the expert at the end of the team and heard a voice of confirmation in her ears. The metal bags behind the 2 rows of soldiers expanded rapidly, wrapping everyone in them. And in the blink of an eye, a disc was formed, with a circle of metal sticks extending from the bottom. They stood on their feet and punched into the narrow detection hole, and the hole became wider and deeper. It was fast and stable. But when it came into contact with that layer of material, a yellowish gas quickly spread in the air. But if you look closely, it is actually solid powder. Although everyone was wearing protective clothing, the filtration system in the clothes quickly issued a warning that this was not within the filtration range. Then, the team pushed forward a 2-person high machine from the back. There was no sound after it was turned on. But the particles in the air quickly sank, and a thick layer of yellow soft soil accumulated on the ground. Duke, His Majesty is looking for you. The voice came into her ears again. Chen Weimao was just about to go to the field to do a big job, and the familiar order came to her again. I don't know what happened recently. Natalia has been looking for her frequently. In addition to the development matters here, many of them are overseas affairs of Tilt's that she has never been involved in before. Because she was sensible. She knew that she was an outsider and would not be fully accepted anywhere. So she would not touch anything too sensitive. However, she had to face it this time. But she still made a simple handover and immediately rushed to the new palace. Today, the closer she got to Natalia's office, the fewer attendants there were. At the end, the guide even let Chen Weimao walk in by herself, before she had time to think about it. As soon as the door opened, she saw a familiar figure from behind. You should know each other, so I won't introduce you. Natalia walked up to her and handed her a glass of wine with a meaningful smile. The man turned around, his face full of enthusiasm, and raised his hand to say hello. Yu Xianyan? It's not easy. I can still see surprise on your face. Yu Xianyan was very excited, holding the glass of wine in his hand and drinking it all. Are you a Tiltesian? No one explained. After a few seconds of blankness, Chen Weimao tried to understand the current scene himself. Let me introduce myself again. My real name is Wan Bai. This year, I am 35 years old. Yu Xianyan extended his hand to her and shook her hand politely. 35? Chen Weimao shook his hand subconsciously. But she couldn't figure it out. The Federal Military Academy had such strict screening, and there were countless mental and physical improvements and examinations during school. How could a person in his 20s escape the attention of the Federation? She noticed Yu Xianyan's abnormality several times, but she didn't think about it. In a country as big as the Federation, it's not surprising for anyone to sneak in. Our body structure is similar to that of the Federation people, but not exactly the same. We have a longer lifespan, generally better physical fitness, and even the mental strength that the Federation people are proud of. Yu Xianyan thought about the wording, and it seemed that there was nothing to praise. At least for me. It's not difficult. And it's easy to integrate. Some things floated in my mind. And some details that I felt wrong at the time, but ignored in an instant, now seem to be clear. Why did Natalia accept and trust her so smoothly when she first arrived in Tilts? And why did Yu Xianyan come all the way to ask her to find out about Su Xiaxi's affairs? And she didn't report such a threat, but just acted very worried? It turned out that she had been under surveillance for a long time. Then why did you risk coming here? There are 2 people from the Federation here. Chen Weimao quickly got rid of the surprise and asked about the business. Natalia asked her to come now. It couldn't be a joke just to see her reaction. Didn't I tell you before that I don't really want the Freedom Technology Organization to exist anymore? Natalia leaned lazily on the chair, tilted her head slightly, and looked at Chen Weimao, as if she was patiently satisfying a curious child. Yes. But since Grayrel fell, she didn't pay much attention to Freedom Technology. She was busy with the relocation at that time. She thought Natalia was in a desperate state of mind. Grayrel is just a short-sighted poor man who tried to revive. If he dies, no one will really be loyal to a digital life that they have never seen and rarely come into contact with. But Shaifai is different. Natalia's eyes were a little lighter and colder. She has loud slogans, but she never takes any life seriously. All living things are tools. As long as she needs them, she will get them and use them anyway. A team led by such a person is always a threat. So you have hinted to me several times to stay. Chen Weimao suddenly realized. Waiting for Yu Xianyan to come back? Is there any news? There is an agricultural alliance on the Federation's Tory Star. Yu Xianyan continued. Agriculture. Selen Country? Chen Weimao responded quickly. Selen Country doesn't have much contact with the outside world because everyone thinks they are not worth contacting. Yu Xianyan passed some information to Chen Weimao. This alliance teaches some planting knowledge to the people here for public welfare, and gives away some crop seeds. This is not suspicious, right? Chen Weimao took a quick look and didn't see any clues. But when she quickly scanned it, she landed on a simple line of internal structural adjustments. The original president made a mistake in decision-making, and the main members of the alliance unanimously decided to nominate Chiozio as the new president. This happened a year ago. It wasn't a big deal, but Chen Weimao had seen too many similar things, so she subconsciously thought of the worst. She looked up to Yu Xianyan to confirm, and as always, her guess came true. This former president is a recognized good person. This evaluation is actually quite rare. He really doesn't do things that make things difficult for the poor for the sake of profit. Later, I secretly contacted the dismissed president. There was nothing unusual about his behavior. He was also confused about what happened at that time. I just felt that he was very resentful at that time and did bring personal emotions into the work. Chen Weimao listened more and more familiar, and she rubbed her forehead unconsciously. Do you have any evidence? Not yet. This kind of thing is difficult to verify. Yu Xianyan spread her hands, just like before. Then this organization. Chen Weimao was speechless, and suddenly found that she had nothing to ask. She had never been able to deal with the confusion of thoughts and emotional loss of control caused by suspected spiritual bodies. Don't you know another spiritual body? Yu Xianyan reminded her. That little ancestor. If he can't find a reason to make her heart move, how can he convince her? The last time she was willing to fight so hard, it was just because she couldn't stand Mozilla, who was the same kind. And she had never accepted the form of an organization like Freedom Technology. Not as good as the Federation. Freedom Technology is like a puppeteer. It doesn't say that it doesn't allow people below to have their own ideas, but it always physically imprisons everyone. Now, should I set off? Knowing her relationship with some people in the Federation, Natalia still chose to let Yu Xianyan stand in front of her openly, and Chen Weimao naturally appreciated it. Your colonel should not be very happy here. Natalia smiled. With some cunning, I cut off his contact with the outside world alone, and he can really endure it. It's okay. He has already adapted to being a farmer. Chen Weimao tried to make amends for him. Farmers don't try to break through my digital control every day. Okay. I'm not blaming you. Natalia stood up and touched the wine glass in Chen Weimao's hand with her fingers. If he had a problem, do you think I would have kept him until now? Colonel Meng is a sensible person, and I like sensible guests. Chen Weimao didn't say anything. Just raised his head and drank it all. We will go to Serlin Country and Tory Star sooner or later. In addition to your people. My team outside can also cooperate with you. Shafai. I don't know if I can find all the clones of this person in various places. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. But I will do my best. Her destiny is not to find a quiet corner to continue her research. Natalia finally showed some real smile in her eyes. Then I wish us success. Chapter 186. In the peaceful and boundless universe. Large and small pieces of gravel flew non-stop. And the tiny fragments all disappeared in the thick black. Chen Weimao looked at the empty detection screen. Stared silently for a while. And then left the cabin. She ran straight to the place she had just scanned. There were stars in the distant direction. But her feet landed on solid metal. The fastener extended from the left-hand position of her combat suit. And she tapped it with her toes. Not far away. There was suddenly a depression. And a natural but incompatible opening appeared. Flashing a faint red light. Chen Weimao jumped in. And the top of her head was immediately sealed. A soothing airflow wrapped around her body. Chen Weimao took off the nano-mask of her combat suit and took a deep breath. The inner door opened quickly. And Gu Wenzhou looked at her with his hands on his hips, with a bad expression. The fortress is good. And the location is good. But it's a bit big. So it's still a bit difficult to hide. Right? Chen Weimao shook off the space dust on her body, which seemed to be particularly abundant around here. I stole it in the first place. So there's no need to ask for so much. Gu Wenzhou raised his mechanical arm and scanned her whole body. Give me the authority? You think too much. You are afraid that strangers will come in and touch around and activate the internal riot control mechanism. Are you still angry? Gu Wenzhou suddenly looked mean. How dare I? You all have a tacit understanding in your heart. You know it without saying it. If I ask too much, won't it be bad? Chen Weimao didn't explain or refute. He knew he was in the wrong. But he couldn't help laughing in this situation. I have already told Lin Qianqing about this. The original words were to let him see the situation and find a suitable time to secretly contact the people of Freedom Technology. So I don't know the exact time and details. You dare to believe this? Gu Wenzhou was about to ask this question subconsciously. But then he thought that his brother couldn't do it. But a stranger who was once hostile could give his life to him. He felt awkward. But couldn't bring himself to say it. So, you don't know the current situation? What about others? Chen Weimao's joking mood gradually calmed down and disappeared. Staring at Gu Wenzhou and making him feel uneasy. We haven't had much contact. The last time, and the only time, was 10 days ago. What did he say? How did he contact you? Chen Weimao didn't say anything, but showed him a piece of code. Gu Wenzhou was very familiar with this. It was a code popular among the students of Miller Military Academy when he was in school. Now it seems that he had nothing to do. So he developed such a boring and rigorous system. Do you understand it? His heart sank. But he still pretended to be calm, and asked while lowering his head to study. I don't understand. So I'm here to find you now. Chen Weimao observed his expression and slowly said, What does it mean? Alive. No contact. To be honest, Gu Wenzhou didn't understand the specific meaning of the two words alive. If Lin Qianqing was not in danger, he wouldn't send such a concise and ambiguous message. But judging from the literal meaning, the danger to his life was probably not serious. Maybe it was because of his current situation that it was no longer convenient for him to contact Chen Weimao. But he didn't contact him before? Anyway, the person is still alive. I guess. Gu Wenzhou couldn't make up his mind. But now, he could only believe it. Let's talk business. He tried to control his expression. I stole this space fortress from the Star Bandits and renovated it. With the technology we got before. The outside devices generally won't detect it here. In the past few months, I only found 2 spacecraft entering. That's enough. The 2 walked in while talking. Chen Weimao naturally stood on the virtual platform, took over the data of these days, and looked at it carefully. Where's Su Xiao? Down there. She's alone? She's living a comfortable life. Gu Wenzhou was a little speechless. She feels more comfortable than when she was with us. What did she find? Everything is normal in the Serlin country on the surface. Every day they just farm, eat and sleep. There is no interference from free technology at all. Is there no movement underground? Gu Wenzhou deliberately glanced at Chen Weimao, who was very focused, and paused without saying anything. Obviously he hadn't said anything yet. Seeing that she didn't respond, He continued, "It's very quiet. We just found the approximate entrance to the underground. But we don't know the exact location yet." She seemed to be waiting for him to finish. And before he finished reading, Gu Wenzhou touched his upper and lower lips. The word stuck in his throat. And finally asked, "Do you know anything else?" Qin Weimo raised his eyes and pursed his lips. "Feng Tan is inside." "When? Why didn't you tell me?" "Sorry. Feng Tan and I are not in a cooperative relationship. When I asked him what he wanted to do, he directly found a way to sneak into this underground team. Even I was not notified later." Qin Weimo's helplessness was not fake. When she found out, her first reaction was fear. She was afraid that Feng Tan would fail and all their preparations would be in vain. But on second thought, she suddenly realized that her trust in Feng Tan was so weak. "How did he get in?" Gu Wenzhou asked with his shoulders slightly drooping. "There is a team of cyborgs down there. There are not many replicas without memory filling. He sneaked in before they were transported here. Aren't you worried?" The two looked at each other and fell silent at the same time. Freedom technology is threatening the lives of all the people in Serlin country. If there is no trouble, there will be no trouble for all three parties. Once there is any disturbance, the worst that can happen is a quarrel. Gu Wenzhou slammed his hands heavily on the table, and the cold light in his eyes seemed to pass through the screen and look directly down to the center of the earth. "So we can't attack by force." Qin Weimo patted his shoulder. "Use this place as a transit station. I'm going to call someone." "Come on." Gu Wenzhou has been in a dilemma here for so long. He has long wanted to take action. "People from the Federation?" he asked. "There are a lot of people," Qin Weimo said ambiguously. "We can only take it quickly here. And we can't make a mistake." "You found Shaifai?" Qin Weimo looked out the window. The country of Serlin below looked lush and full of vitality. The terraces on the mountain were covered with layers, and a few people stood here and there, working in the warm light. After being used to mechanical farming, Su Xiaoxiao, who had been here for a few months, was still not used to this inefficient lifestyle. It was so peaceful that it seemed as if the life before was just an illusion. "Xiaoxiao, what are you staring at? Come to the shade of the tree and drink some water," the simple middle-aged woman called her. "Come on." She trotted over with a smile on her face. The people here are so easy to control. She just made them feel that she was not a stranger. A familiar feeling arose from the bottom of their hearts, coupled with the story she made up. She became an orphan who had lost both her parents and lived alone. They said they were testing whether the free technology had been mixed in. But the other party didn't put any effort into this. There were so many dangerous mountains. It was easy to avoid people. She lived smoothly like this. Until not long ago, she received a message from Gu Wenzhou in outer space. Qin Weimo finally came. "Here, things are finally going to be uneasy. Xiaoxiao, this is what I just made at noon. Take it and eat it." The woman took out 2 pottery jars and stuffed them into Su Xiaoxiao's arms generously. Auntie Lu. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Every now and then she would receive something from her neighbors. Either food or daily necessities they made themselves. Perhaps because they were worried that a skinny little girl like her would be in trouble. It seemed that everyone tacitly helped her, overtly or covertly. She had never influenced these people's moods to make it easier for her to move around, because there was no need at all, and it had already been accomplished. "Take it. It's delicious." Aunt Lu was also happy, and she put a few small fruits in her mouth. Seeing the basket thrown into the mud not far away, she rushed over. "How many times have I said it? That mud is not easy to wash off. You old thing just don't care." She walked away cursing, and the sound around Su Xiaoxiao's ears gradually faded. She looked up at the light, squinting her eyes, and her whole body was warm. The outline of the small hilltop was very clear, with blue and green connected. She closed her eyes, and the chirping of birds and insects seemed to be amplified a lot. She stayed like this for a while, and then opened her eyes again. There was a figure on the line on the horizon, but it disappeared in a flash. Su Xiaoxiao's face turned cold, and she lightly tapped the white earrings on her earlobes, and immediately heard a noisy sound in her ears. "Can you hear me? Today? Some of them are coming, so I just follow them. What do you want me to do? Do you want to continue?" Su Xiaoxiao thought Qin Weimo was being long-winded. "Isn't it just keeping an eye on the outside to see if there are any fish that escaped? Then I assume that you are willing to continue to encircle and suppress freedom technology." A chuckle came from the other side. The old couple in front of her were still bickering, and Su Xiaoxiao trotted a few steps and stepped into the field, interrupting them with a smile, and leading the topic to a more peaceful daily conversation. The noise in her ears weakened, and she knew that she had successfully passed the defense line and entered the underground. I thought, there should be no more complete conversation. They wanted to quietly break everyone's neck, without even the sound of the body falling to the ground. Occasionally, there were muffled resistant sounds from people covering their mouths, but they were not obvious in the headphones, and would not attract anyone's attention at the scene. Aunt Lou, have the people who went into the mountains to pick mushrooms yesterday come out? Should I prepare dinner? Su Xiaoxiao asked. Oh, I almost forgot. I'm with you. I wonder if I can bring something less bitter this time. Last time. Alas. Aunt Lou couldn't help complaining when she mentioned the bitter mushroom she ate last time. She kept talking, and the noise in Su Xiaoxiao's ears increased slightly. Natalia's people solved the East District. West District is done. One ran away. Chen Weimo's voice was very calm, reporting the progress to her in real time. Even if someone slipped away, she didn't panic at all. Aunt Lou, let's go. I'm going to cook. Chapter 187. There are many people in the mountains. Su Xiaoxiao felt it at the foot of the mountain. She found an excuse to go to the nearby area to greet the villagers who were going to go down the mountain today. But as far as the eye can see, there is silence. Even the flying birds are lazily staying on the branches of the trees. She walked towards the deep mountains, and the road she could walk became less and less. But she walked faster and faster. She clearly felt that there were many people, but she could not see anyone. She was climbing up, and suddenly her breath was choked, and she turned back suddenly. The air behind the tree that was 2 people wide twisted slightly, and a human figure appeared, holding a gun and looking capable. We are one. Don't worry about it, the man said coldly. His eyes fell gently on Su Xiaoxiao. Su Xiaoxiao was stunned for a moment. This man had no hostility towards her at all, and it seemed that he was not talking to her. The Duke said that he would most likely go up the mountain, and told us not to hurt our own people on the 4th and 5th lines of defense. The man took the initiative to explain. This is the outermost 5th line, and it is still safe at the moment. The person you are looking for is on the 4th line, and has not entered the danger zone. What's going on inside? Su Xiaoxiao couldn't help but ask. She told you not to worry. It won't affect the people below. Just as she promised before. She doesn't talk much, and there are no actual results. But she is somehow trustworthy. According to the plan in the guide, they will appear at the fork in the road with the bee stone. There are no obvious roads on the mountain, but there are depressions formed by people walking too much. Only those who often go up the mountain know which way is easier and safer. How long have you been here? Su Xiaoxiao asked. This way. Please. The other party ignored her question and just extended his hand politely and distantly to point the way. Su Xiaoxiao didn't intend to entangle. It's better to save her trouble. She left with a cold face, and the soldiers of Tilt kept watching her. Just because we have to take care of her. We are so depressed like rats in the gutter? Another soldier next to him turned off the stealth mode and showed up. The people here are innocent too. Try not to disturb their lives. The man answered calmly. But when he turned back to look at him, his eyes were a little more fierce. Besides duty, other creatures are also lives. Yes. Sorry. Go back to your position. Don't let down at the critical moment. Yes. He sent away the subordinate, who was a little complaining, but did not blame him. They have been sneaking in here for a month, and have a thorough understanding of this mountain that stretches for hundreds of miles. Every secret entrance that Freedom Technology has ever entered and exited. Every weak area suitable for robbery. They have set people to monitor it all day long. After guarding for so long, they were on edge all the time. They also had the task of protecting civilians and preventing them from discovering the internal turmoil. It was normal to have emotions. Many people had lost contact with them. They only knew that they were still under control. Z. The conductor in his ear suddenly made an intermittent sound of electricity. He had not been able to receive complete messages since an hour ago. Captain of the Guard. Please reply if you have received it. It was Chen Weimo's voice. Logically, the frontline commander didn't need to contact him at the outermost perimeter. I got it. What's the Duke's order? He turned and went into the underground bunker, finding a safe place to answer calmly. Final finishing. No matter what happens, hold the number 5 defense line. It sounded very calm, not in the midst of intense movement. And there was nothing unusual around. And it was not conveyed through text, but directly through voice. Received. Guaranteed to complete the mission. And the other side paused. Deploy energy shields. Covering the entire planet. Yes. He looked at the real-time detection of life in this area. And the villagers had already walked out of the warning area. Chen Weimo's order was a deployment to avoid harming innocent people to the greatest extent before the war. They had long cut off all possible channels of communication between this planet and the outside world, including any form of communication. But for confidentiality, physical defense is far less thorough than other preparations. There are not only people from Tilt's underground, but also soldiers from the Scott Federation. Before coming, Her Majesty Natalia had ordered that while taking care of her own life, she should also retain the image and strength she showed to the outside world. But now, I am afraid that this cannot be done. A halo soon appeared above the planet. Su Xiaoxiao noticed it soon after she received the person. There was a faint blue halo in the sky. She had seen something similar before. The core of the energy shield was located in the sky, and the active energy towers placed in various corners transmitted energy to all edges of the shield wall through rays to enhance the effect. Chen Weimo said that this thing is like a huge bubble that has been blown up, and a small part of it has merged with the planet on the ground. But everything that happens in this bubble will not interfere with the real world that is close at hand. Some bubbles even have virtual image functions. And Chen Weimo has not explained the current situation to her. What are you looking at? Xiao. Are there flowers in the sky? The people in front noticed the girl who fell last and joked. Nothing. I just think the clouds today are pretty. Su Xiaoxiao naturally wouldn't point it out. Let's go. If the food gets cold, Aunt Lu will start nagging again. When they thought of Aunt Lu who never kept to herself, everyone quickened their pace tacitly. The blue sky seemed to be slightly mixed with a hint of purple. But this color shift did not attract the attention of the people working hard on the ground. The edge of the cloud sometimes flickered with a faint light, but it was fleeting and would disappear inadvertently. Su Xiaoxiao couldn't taste the food in the noisy voices. She felt a lot of energy fluctuations. Explosive. Chaotic. Large scale. No one knows when it will stop. She looked down at her feet. The ground was very quiet. Nothing unusual. It's okay. They must have forced the people from Freedom Technology out from underground and carried out aerial sniping. So there was no ground shaking. Only those weak abnormalities. She secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Quickly restored her warm smile and chatted with the people at the dinner table. It's strange to say. This time, I felt that going into the mountains was particularly smooth. The man who just came back sighed as he ate. His cheeks were stuffed with food. But he still insisted. Whatever you think, it will come true. Mushrooms are everywhere. How dare you say that? Auntie Lu hit him on the head. Several people ran around the mountain. And in the end, they only brought back a few? At least they are all edible this time. He forced a sophistry and skillfully avoided another beating from Auntie Lu. Where are they growing? I've never been there. Su Xiaoxiao asked in the middle of the conversation. What's there to do on the mountain? It's cold, wet, and hard to climb. The edible mushrooms grow on the cliffs to the east. It's just that I'm lucky today. I can get there without much effort by stepping on the stones. East. Chen Weimo didn't tell Su Xiaoxiao about the specific deployment, but she could feel that there seemed to be some changes there. And from the location, it is very likely that it is one of the escape routes of the underground people. But someone began to recall. I feel that the mountain is weird. What's strange? Sometimes I feel like someone is staring at me. You wish. Who wants to look at you more? I hit you. Su Xiaoxiao finished her meal absent-mindedly. It was getting dark. She returned to her small room alone. She paused at the door and pushed it open. Breaking into a private house? I'm hungry. Is there anything to eat? The woman's combat uniform was torn, and the blood on her exposed skin was coagulated and dried, as if it had not been wiped clean. When she looked up, one of her eyes was slightly absent-minded. Su Xiaoxiao's unpleasant words were stuck in her throat. She wanted to ask a lot of questions, but she swallowed them. She would not spend too much time to prepare anything, but just took out all the food that could be eaten. While she was busy, she would occasionally glance at Chen Weimo. She was half stiff, staring at the light brain without moving. She was neither happy nor sad, and she didn't look like she had experienced a fierce battle at all. Is it all over? Su Xiaoxiao threw the dry food in front of her and asked casually. Well, we can't delay here. We have to fight quickly and decisively. And we can't leave them any chance to contact the outside world. Chen Weimo moved his right shoulder slightly, but raised his left hand, grabbed something, and put it into his mouth. If we didn't hide it, and didn't protect the indigenous people here, we wouldn't have to fight so hard. Su Xiaoxiao lowered her eyes, and said calmly. If we had planned this from the beginning, we wouldn't have to wait so long. Chen Weimo wiped the unnatural eye, which seemed to move more flexibly. They didn't find it. No. That's good. There was only a slight chewing sound in the room. One was busy. The other was pretending to be busy. After a while, Chen Weimo said again, I should go. I came here just to let you know that this is over. Do you want to leave with me now? Without waiting for Su Xiaoxiao to reply, she continued, Freedom Technology has experienced so many internal and external changes and suppressions, and has been purified and cohesive. Although the military suppression this time is more thorough, it cannot make them fall apart in a short time. If you go, it will probably be easier. All we need to do here is erase their memories. It's not difficult. There's still time to think about it. I eat another one. Su Xiaoxiao's expression froze. Didn't you say you were leaving? To give you time to think about it. If it wasn't because she couldn't do any physical harm, she would hit people. Chen Weimo did it on purpose. She saw her subtle adaptation and reluctance to give up here, and deliberately made her make a choice. There's no value in staying here. Leave tonight. Su Xiaoxiao replied formally. Have you thought about it? Nothing to think about. Chen Weimo stood up slowly, and ran his fingers across the table. Thank you for separating a part of yourself and deceiving Mozilla before. Don't talk nonsense. Su Xiaoxiao interrupted her impatiently, and wanted to scold her, but suddenly raised her eyebrows slightly, and looked at the embarrassed man in a playful way. Why are you looking at me like that? Chen Weimo was stared at, and the hand holding the food began to stiffen. What did you do down there? So many people still have the energy to squat in the woods in the middle of the night? Su Xiaoxiao looked out the window, but her eyes seemed to penetrate the layers of shadows. Oh! Chen Weimo relaxed and continued to eat. Don't worry about them. It's their own business. And it's hard to persuade a ghost who wants to die. Chapter 188. Gu Wenzhou quietly updated his mechanical arm in an empty corner. The metal shell was like scales, twisting finely and densely, forming an elegant arc. Every corner around was filled with temporary allied soldiers who attacked the underground base. Everyone was concentrating and didn't dare to breathe. But his mind was full of what Chen Weimo said to him. Natalia's people won't care whether you live or die. Although the people from the Federation are from the 2nd Military Region. Meng Leji found something wrong. Be careful. Be careful. Be careful of what? After such a long time. What value does he still have to be exploited? What is there to be feared? Gu Wenzhou was irritated and shook his metal arm. And the changing machinery tightened immediately, almost without sound. He and Chen Weimo were not in the same area. At first, he thought that he was fighting side by side with the federal soldiers, and was familiar with each other's style and actions. Now Chen Weimo threw a thunderbolt, and he was in a dilemma. The patrol soldiers of the Freedom Technology on the periphery walked to the area where they were ambushed. The nano-level trackers placed in advance were attached to everyone's exposed skin like ghosts, and the uniform footsteps suddenly dispersed without anyone noticing. The ambushed soldiers stepped forward in time, dragged all the soldiers who died instantly to the side one by one, processed them quickly without making any noise, and replaced their biometric information one by one. Everything went smoothly. Their initial ideal state was like this, quietly suppressing Freedom Technology in this underground space made of reinforced concrete. Wu Dun was in the middle of the team, and he could take care of both the front and the back. His eyes wandered and fell on Gu Wenzhou at the edge. Occasionally, their eyes met, but they said nothing. The team in the other direction quickly and silently broke through the enemy's central control room. Everything went according to plan. Only the weapons depot remained silent. Given the importance of that place, they could not waste any time to gradually advance. They had to secretly take down all the nodes and attack at the same time to maximize the advancement of other teams. Zizi. Zizi. A sound came from my ear. Start the backup plan. Chen Weimo's voice fluctuated slightly, and the sound in the background also seemed to be amplified. The backup plan is to deploy energy shields, which are concealed defense lines for large weapons detonation. As soon as the sound in his ears disappeared, Gu Wenzhou immediately switched the weapon mode and ran away. But his arm was grabbed. He seemed a little surprised. The original plan was that if the weapons depot had to be disturbed, they would allocate a quarter of their manpower to go there to support. Wu Dun naturally knew about it. What are you doing? Don't waste time. Gu Wenzhou didn't think much, but just tried to shake off. But Wu Dun held him tighter. Federal order? Do your own thing. Chen Weimo did not wait for support, and the contact was cut off. More than half of the Tilt soldiers she led were killed or injured. But she did not go to find the two partners immediately. She only let the rest of the people rest and evacuate directly after confirming that there was no potential threat in the weapons depot, and that no one from Freedom Technology survived. She went to the ground alone. There are only two possibilities. One is that Gu Wenzhou and Wu Dun were completely wiped out and objectively could not be contacted. But since her people have successfully left the planet, it can only be the second possibility. She moved her newly grown, not very flexible limbs, sat on a stool in Su Xiaoxia's house, and stared at the broken optical computer. I don't know if the core parts are broken or what. The optical computer is very quiet. No one's message. As for the people outside, the quiet night is indeed suitable for dealing with some grudges. Su Xiaoxia thought they would have a tense fight. But there was a polite knock on the door. TSK. Pretending. She complained in her heart. Gu Wenzhou stood in front of the door in a neat outfit. The door was not high to begin with. And he, a big guy in combat uniform and with a mechanical arm, standing here, was a bit oppressive. It was a pity that his expression ruined the momentum at the moment. Your side. I let them go. You saw it too, Chen Weimo said lightly. No one stopped them, which means they were not interested. A little chewing sound broke out in the silence. Su Xiaoxiao suddenly ate very vigorously, her eyes jumping back and forth between the two of them. I admit that the trust one gave you has threatened my own safety. Chen Weimo's voice was calm without any resentment. I was wrong about this. Then, no matter what I do next, I hope you won't complain. As soon as he finished speaking, a cold air flashed in front of Gu Wenzhou's neck. Forget it, Chen Weimo. The blade only scratched his skin a little, and there was no blood. Forget it. There's no more fighting. Gu Wenzhou stood still. He nodded and stared at the other party, his eyes trembling. Freedom Technology is over. There's no need to fight. Wu Dun just told you this. Chen Weimo raised his eyelids slightly. There is a big difference between not being able to fight and not being able to fight. Is it the Federation? No. It's Shaifai. She asked the Federation for peace? A sneer suddenly came from behind. Not even hiding it. Chen Weimo looked into Gu Wenzhou's eyes and understood. What is her bargaining chip? Everything about Freedom Technology is at the disposal of the Federation? What is this? You know, she doesn't care whether Freedom Technology is merged or disbanded, as long as someone can provide her with the resources she wants and allow her to continue to do experiments. It doesn't matter what she does or who she follows. So today, it's just a token of her allegiance. Gu Wenzhou lowered his eyes and clenched his teeth. What else? Su Xiaoxiao suddenly asked. Why are you so guilty? Angry? And shaken? What else did she promise the Federation? There was an unbearable silence. So you came here to get rid of the unstable factors that might break this balance? Chen Weimo took a step back. No. No! Gu Wenzhou quickly denied. If they wanted to cross the river and burn the bridge, they would not turn a blind eye and let them go. Then it's me? Chen Weimo lowered her head slightly and glanced at the clean reply box again. Do they know? Chen Weimo gently supported the table with both hands, watching the ugly scar that almost tore the entire arm heal quickly and slowly faded. This means that before coming here, the Federation, at least Wu Dun's team, just watched her go around like a fool, quietly waiting for the end of the activity that had no risks in the first place. And then when she was at a disadvantage, they took advantage of her without any effort. At that time, she even thought that Wu Dun's abnormality was directed at Gu Wenzhou. What about Mengleji? There are not many people in the interstellar world who chase Shaifei all the way to the end. And you are one of them. And she can't use the exchange of interests to coordinate. Besides, she found the Federation. She did get what she wanted. Gu Wenzhou spoke quickly in one breath, but suddenly stopped. Got it. Chen Weimo stood up straight, and her face returned to its usual calmness. She knew what Shaifei wanted all along. I don't have much time. I just want to ask you one question. She looked at Gu Wenzhou. Are you going? Go. How to go? Wu Dun surrounded the place. waiting for him to negotiate with Chen Weimo first. If he succeeds, it would be the best. If he fails, he could only take him by force. Gu Wanzhou's body was hot, and he didn't dare to meet Chen Weimo's eyes. He pulled his collar again and cursed in a low voice. My spaceship is not parked together with theirs. It's not far from here. I give you the authority. He quickly tapped the mechanical arm a few times. I'm going to make some noise, and you can go while the chaos is going on. No need. Chen Weimo refused softly. We can't go together. Outside, Gu Wanzhou was about to argue. But when he looked at Chen Weimo and Su Xiaoxiao sitting on a chair against the wall behind him, and suddenly pulled out a safety strap, he suddenly calmed down. The Federation was able to gain the upper hand this time only because she trusted Meng Liji and Wu Dun. But before that, all the arrangements here were to deal with freedom technology. But it was a pipe dream for Wu Dun to continue to make progress on this strange planet that had been planned for a long time. Are you testing me? Gu Wanzhou laughed in anger. But he was not really angry. It was not a good feeling to be fooled by someone who had kept a secret from him. There was no friendship between them. Besides, the precious resources they received were the enemies he had been chasing for so long. The place is big. It doesn't matter if you are one more or one less. Chen Weimo pointed to another seat and asked him to sit down. It's just that I am sorry for the good environment here. After saying that, she pressed the bottom of the table, and the whole room began to shake violently. Gu Wanzhou subconsciously grasped the seat, and then came a violent feeling of weightlessness, accompanied by a dull rumble. Soon, in just a dozen seconds, the house stopped shaking. But the containers inside the house were broken all over the floor. Chen Weimo opened the door first, and outside the door was not a dark deep mountain forest, but a cold white light. Where is this? Gu Wanzhou followed out, walked through a short tunnel, and actually saw a flying machine. Is this underground? At that time, this place was chosen as the observation point because the terrain here was suitable, and it was very convenient to dig an underground escape passage. But at that time, I really didn't expect it to be used. Su Xiaoxiao took over the conversation. Her usual casual smile was somewhat strange. Use explosions to cause a false earthquake. The cracked ground will close instantly, and the natives here will not be affected too much. Explosion? Where was it? Gu Wanzhou was keenly aware of it. Let my people go to the most dangerous place. So we must naturally get the corresponding advantage. Chen Weimo entered the spaceship without looking back, and didn't care what Gu Wanzhou thought. Even if Wu Dun didn't let people go just now, she had a way to find someone to support from the outside. She didn't need to accept the favor of giving a sweet date, and then a slap in the face. Leaving a loophole in the space deployment early was a trick Chen Weimo often used. With the help of stealth mode, they successfully and openly passed by the Federation spacecraft. Where are you going next? To find Colonel Meng? Gu Wanzhou was awkward for a while, and then adjusted himself. There was an insurmountable gap between him and the Federation. Betrayal and being betrayed. He trotted and followed. What about Lin Qianqing? If Sha Fei surrendered to the Federation, how would Mozilla deal with him? If you find him, you can find Lin Qianqing. Chen Weimo sat in the main driving seat, thought for a moment, and then decided on a seat. But at least find out what Sha Fei wants first. Chapter 189. Deep in the forest. It was quiet and peaceful, with towering pines and cypresses scattered in an orderly manner. Occasionally, a few gentle rays of light shone through the gaps between the branches and leaves, falling on the winding path. At the end of the path, a quiet retreat was vaguely visible. Unlike the surrounding natural scenery, the outer walls of the house were spotless white, but the roof and walls were covered with emerald green vines. Qi Yixuan stood halfway up the mountain, supporting herself on the rocks on the side of the road with both hands. She couldn't help trembling slightly, and she stood there stiffly for a long time. Finally, she quickly clicked a metal strap on her waist, and a miniature exoskeleton instantly unfolded along her spine and legs. She breathed a sigh of relief, but fell to the ground in frustration, with a thin layer of sweat on her forehead. The wind in the mountains was cool, and the occasional roar of unknown creatures was also broken by the wind. Qi Yixuan stared at the ground absent-mindedly for a long time before being interrupted by an uninvited guest. A six-legged creature that looked like a fleshworm walked up to her and dug the soil with its hind legs. She remembered that this creature seemed to be called Fuda Beast. Although it didn't look cute, it was also harmless. It climbed trees and ate fruits all day long in the appearance of a carnivore. She stretched out her hand and waved it over its head. But she didn't really touch it. And the Fuda beast ignored her, and just raised its head. When their eyes met, Qi Yixuan's expression changed, and the remaining softness disappeared, replaced by an undisguised disgust. The Fuda beast's eyes had human-like pupils, but they were very empty, and there was a red dot on the upper left of the eyeball. Qi Yixuan stood up and walked down the path, and the forest behind him still heard bursts of roars. Yixuan. A quick and familiar voice came. Moero suddenly jumped out from the side path and jumped to Qi Yixuan's side. Qi Yixuan's stinky face could not be recovered, facing the enemy who suddenly appeared. His face was pulled even longer. Are you targeting me again? Not this time. Moero quickly denied. I just finished my work and wanted to find you. It was really a coincidence that I met you. Qi Yixuan wanted to say something but stopped. She just felt sick in her heart and said nothing. She felt sick even when she took the initiative to say that the Federation did something bad here, as the independent military region that suffered the most losses in the ongoing confrontation with Freedom Technology. After Shaifai surrendered to the Federation, it was excluded from related affairs, and it was difficult to intervene. All the achievements and benefits brought by Shaifai were divided up by other military regions. And one of the benefits that Morua's third military region received was here. A dense planet called Field Star. All the animals here have been transformed. And it is not a simple physical transformation. Shaifai has always been proud of this. And this is also one of the items she used to negotiate with the Federation. Whatever. Qi Yixuan gently shook off the hand that Morua had been struggling to find a place to hold, and ignored the other party's lonely expression. Although the environment here is very good and suitable for recuperation. After all, the deployment is complicated, and the control is dense. You should not walk around casually. Yes, worthless soldiers are destined to be abandoned. And of course, they should not come here without any sense. Yixuan. Qi Yixuan continued to talk to himself as if he didn't hear it, but since I can no longer serve in the Federation, as an ordinary citizen of the Federation, I also have the right to live on a natural planet that is not under military control. You know it. Moero whispered a few words, but still shut up. It was always a topic of dispute, and since neither side would compromise, it was better not to speak. Qi Yixuan's residence here was at the foot of the mountain, with many connections and an extremely arrogant geographical location. She didn't care if the people of the Federation knew she was here. She wanted to see what her colleagues' attitude would be when she herself was placed in the position of a victim. But she didn't have any delusions. After all, she had once taken over the resources delivered to her by the surrenderers, who had been enemies of the Federation. This situation is like a boomerang. She laughed at herself lightly, but she didn't underestimate herself too much. She stood at the door, and the house system automatically recognized her and opened the door. Morua followed closely. There were few furniture in the house. There was only a chair in front of the window in the hall. In addition to the necessary recovery and medical accessories, other rooms only had a bed and basic utensils. Morua didn't even have a place to sit. He stood in the hall a little awkwardly. Although he had been here several times, he was not used to this way of entertaining guests. Just as he was trying to find a suitable place for his limbs, he suddenly saw a familiar and indifferent face behind the stairs at the junction of the two floors. He didn't even react completely before a violent force rushed straight to his face. A muffled sound of falling to the ground caught Qi Yixuan's attention. She rushed over with a stiff limb carrying the water she had just poured, and saw Moero lying on the ground, unable to struggle. Next to him stood a person who could not be contacted. Wei Mo. Qi Yixuan was surprised and just wanted to take a step forward, but was pointed at by the black muzzle of a gun. Chen Weimo did not turn her head to look at her, but just stared at Morua's neck on the ground, the place where she had just hit. There was a small metal strip embedded in the flesh, but there was almost no blood seeping out. Is Sha Fei here? She asked. Wei Mo don't play dead. She kicked Morua and ignored Qi Yixuan. Ahem. Is this a mental suppressant? Morua struggled to prop himself up with his arms, his voice a little hoarse. He remembered that Shaifai had studied this thing from liquid reagents. The Federation has never been a friend, so naturally we have to prepare weapons suitable for you. You came alone? How did you find this place? Chen Weimao lost the last bit of patience, took a step forward, stepped on his chest, and crushed it. No. Wait a minute. She's here, Qi Yixuan blurted out, which made Chen Weimao look at her straight in the eye. We can't contact you, and neither can the captain. Why did you contact me? To inform me that the cooperation is invalid? No. No. Qi Yixuan suddenly wanted to slap herself. Even now. She couldn't say it. She thought about telling Chen Weimao urgently that the Federation had suddenly broken the contract, and that she had been identified as a threat by the Federation. It was just that there were too many changes due to the combination of circumstances. They betrayed both parties at the same time. The Federation used some means to cut off the contact channels between us and you. I don't want to make excuses. The fact is, she suddenly calmed down and relaxed a lot. The Federation has chosen greater values, and anyone who stands in their way is a threat. You, the captain, are both. She deliberately emphasized the latter slightly, observing the other party's reaction. But Chen Weimao listened quietly, with no movement on his face. Who say the things on Vincia? Moro was caught off guard by the sudden change of topic. But when he saw Chen Weimao's leg rising, he immediately reacted. It was Shaifai's men. Many of the results she had determined to be failures were secretly hidden, even though she had already issued an order to destroy them. This was one of the reasons why she came to surrender. What does she need Meng Lizhi to do? Moero's eyelids sank slightly, and he suddenly relaxed and lay on the ground. Even if you don't know the details, can't you guess her general purpose? Meng Lizhi is unwilling to cooperate now. But even if he disobeys military orders, he will not be really abandoned by the Federation. And you, Chen Weimao, no one can guarantee that you can leave here alive. How far has Sha Fei's research progressed? Chen Weimao seemed not to have heard, and continued to interrogate in a flat tone. Moro's mouth corners were raised, but there was no smile in his eyes. The Federation's development of mental power has been stagnant for a long time. At present, it is indeed Meng Lizhi who has done the best. But Sha Fei has shown the Federation the possibility of artificially creating mental power. So you say, how far has she progressed? And to what extent will the Federation support her? The last question. Chen Weimao stepped back a few steps, leaned on the table, took out a micro-bomb from the folding device, and weighed it in his hand. The two people around him were obviously stiff. No. Are you serious? Moero immediately stood up, in a semi-defensive state. You can't keep suffering in one place. Chen Weimao raised his eyes gleaming coldly. It's just treating the symptoms, but not the root cause. Has no one ever told you this? Moero tried to pull off the inhibitor on his neck, but the inhibitory effect had been achieved, and he couldn't mobilize his mental strength to do anything at the moment. People will laugh when they are speechless to a certain extent. He didn't expect that he could be knocked to the ground in this way without any ability to resist. But seeing Chen Weimao lose consciousness for a moment was enough. Even if you find Sha Fei's hiding place today and kill her, don't forget that she has always been cunning and has 3 burrows. How could she let people know how many copies of her consciousness she has? Moero moved his feet calmly and approached Qi Yixuan. The Federation asked her, and she did confess a few. But do you believe she will tell all of them? She also has a loyal deputy, whose whereabouts are still unknown. And if you make a noise at Yixuan's house today, and I don't contact other subordinates in time, do you think Sha Fei will be transferred? Why didn't anyone tell me about this? Qi Yixuan interrupted quietly, somewhat shocked that the Federation actually tolerated this kind of unequal agreement. Ahem. Moro cleared his throat. Anyway, you are a smart person. For Heber's sake, I won't expose you today. Otherwise Meng Lizhi will have to settle accounts with me later, which is troublesome. So the best way for you and me is? Mozilla is here. Chen Weimao just interrupted him calmly and watched his reaction. And the other party was not too surprised as she wished. There is a space under the forest 120 miles west of here. Technology cannot detect it, but it exists. How long have you been here? Moero began to look serious. He suddenly realized that the person in front of him did not come here with anger and impulse, and he could not persuade a calm person to leave without Shibo passing on the news to her. She still figured out the place while being wanted, and their deployment here has not been noticed until now. I still have one last question. Chen Weimao raised his eyes, glanced at Qi Yixuan behind him, and quickly retracted his gaze. His fingertips rubbed the controller on the palm of his hand and pressed it resolutely. Chapter 190. The explosion occurred instantly, and the huge shock wave made the surrounding air seem to freeze for a second. However, the entire forest remained silent, and only the aftermath of the vibration caused the birds and animals in the forest to flee in all directions. Rolling up a few dry leaves, Chen Weimao slowly walked out of the virtual shielding barrier that had been deployed long ago. And her figure blended into the jungle. Her steps were light and crisp, and she skillfully followed the secret path that had been stepped on in advance, and quickly went down in a half-running and half-sliding manner. Or go to Shaifai's hiding place. Su Xiaoxiao's figure suddenly emerged from the side, and followed her steps like a breeze. There are many people there. Aren't you afraid of getting into trouble if you go down alone? We have figured it out now, so we make a quick decision. She kept walking, but her eyes were always fixed on a place in the distance, calculating the time in her mind. This is the last time. We will no longer have a cooperative relationship in the future. Whether you want to stay in the Federation or go anywhere else, it's up to you. Su Xiaoxiao nimbly avoided a protruding tree root, but her eyes did not become tense as they rushed, but instead revealed a hint of carelessness and ease. To be honest, there is nothing I want to do. Chen Weimao braked suddenly and grabbed a tree trunk to avoid sliding away. Anyway, no political organization will exist for a long time. They should, and certainly will not exist as long as I do, since they will naturally perish at that time. Why should I speed up the process everywhere? Su Xiaoxiao smiled, without any emotion, and just said the conclusion as a matter of course, seeing that Chen Weimao didn't say anything, but just stared at her with a complicated expression. She couldn't help but laugh. Am I wrong? Chen Weimao came back to his senses and continued to move forward. According to what you said, nothing will last forever. Shaifai, I don't have to hold on to it. That's different. One is an inevitable trend, and the other is an unpredictable individual. You short-lived species. Don't you have to spend your whole life in places you can't control? Thank you for your guidance. After running for more than 10 minutes, the two of them stopped and stood behind a huge tree on the edge of the cliff. The hill below was lush and green, and the situation on the ground could not be seen. But Chen Weimao knew that was where Sha Fei was hiding. It was not difficult to get the personnel movement data of the entire planet, but this was the most dense and orderly place. Chen Weimao tiptoed lightly, exhaled, turned to look at Su Xiaoxiao. Let's stop here. I will do it myself later. Su Xiaoxiao shook her head and slightly moved aside to make way for her. The thorough scan of the entire planet was not greatly hindered, and it seemed that the Federation's defense was not at a very high level. Chen Weimao got the structural diagram of the semi-underground facility without much effort. She slid in through the ventilation duct according to the original plan, and the clothes on her body also had shielding and interference monitoring materials. The sultry air flowed in the narrow duct, and the walls were covered with fine metal patterns, transmitting constant high temperatures. Ordinary humans simply cannot tolerate such an environment. So this is not a corner that needs to be strictly guarded. Everything went surprisingly smoothly. It went so smoothly that it seemed as if there was no one in the entire underground fortress. At the end of the passage, neat footsteps echoed in the corridor below. Chen Weimao held her breath and silently noted the time interval between patrols. She couldn't confirm which room it was, but the layout here was really familiar. When Sha Fei had private property in other places, he would always put a storage room next to the laboratory, which was specially used to store a large number of mental drugs. And the two rooms were connected, because she couldn't be sure which experiment would cause the spirit to go out of control. Even if she used a living body that she despised, she would be careful to prepare defensive measures. The storage room here was not manned, and Chen Weimao easily confirmed the location. Then the next door. She rolled down from the ventilation duct, stepped on the ground silently, cut off a piece of the adjacent metal wall, and some light from the next door came through. Very quiet. From this angle, she couldn't see anything. Only a wide sofa with its back to her. But using a micro device to scan, there was a completely sunken human figure on the front of the sofa, with a faint breath. After waiting for a while, there was still no movement. There was only the background sound of the water flowing continuously. She enlarged the hole and climbed in, leaning against the wall next to the sofa. She quietly looked at the motionless torso. Sha Fei's eyes were out of focus, and he didn't know where his sight was. His limbs sank softly. His neck tilted weakly, and the sofa was wet. He was still alive, but his life was a little blurry. After not seeing each other for a long time, this look is very new. At least it looks strange on Shaifai. Chen Weimao was not shocked for too long. She walked deeper into the room. Her footsteps were silent, but there was still a response from inside the room. Weimao. The sound of water stopped, and the door was opened. Meng Leji half hanged his wet head, his expression hidden in the shadows. It just ended. Shafei is indeed difficult to deal with. I knew you would come, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. He walked slowly. His breath was unstable. Yixuan and Moero are also here. Did you meet them? It was only a dozen minutes since Chen Weimo left Yixuan's house and came here. In addition, she deliberately concealed it. So it was normal that the people of the Federation did not notice it. But you can't contact me. Or don't want to contact me? Chen Weimo asked. I caught the person who tampered with the communication inside. After the line was restored, the news of your escape also came. I told Shibua's people not to contact you for the time being. Mengliji leaned against the wall and raised his head. Chen Weimo saw that his eyes were red. Don't get involved anymore. What's going on later? Of course, I won't get involved in the Federation's affairs. Your fight has nothing to do with me. Chen Weimo interrupted him, raised his hand to touch his soaked collar, and secretly squeezed it. But I have to see this matter through to the end. And, Weimo, there's no need. Mengliji had no strength to speak. He raised his arm and gently tucked Chen Weimo's hair behind his temples. I made excuses several times and strongly opposed the Federation's acceptance of Shafei's cooperation, and then pretended to be threatened and dragged over, which made the superiors and Shafei relax their vigilance. But now, I have destroyed the Federation's plan to improve its mental power, and I have risked digging out all the copies of consciousness in Shafei's mind. Since we have already torn our faces apart, I can only do it to the end. But, I'm sorry. Anyway, this time, I didn't make it clear. To what extent? I want the Federation to treat people as people. I want the creatures in the universe to no longer be inferior to humans. Weimo. He pressed Chen Weimo's shoulders and looked directly into her eyes. I want us, to no longer passively accept all this. When their eyes met, they were deep and deep. Then this will be the last time. The water drops on the hair dripped onto the back of Chen Weimo's hand. She straightened Mengliji and gently held him in her arms. But as soon as he stood up, she stabbed him in the back of his neck. He fell lightly on her body. She hugged him tightly, and then let him go. She did not find a comfortable place, but gently placed Mengliji where he was. Then she stood in front of Shafei and fired several shots at his face and body. Death is not enough. She wanted no one to check the life experience of this corpse. She did not stop at all and returned along the original path. When she returned to the ground, she ran to another direction without stopping. Shafei succeeded here. How about your side? She asked while moving. The perimeter and support are all fine. I am familiar with the defense of the Federation. It is not difficult to crack. Gu Wanzhou's voice came. He hesitated for a moment and asked, how did you succeed? Shoot. I mean, Yixuan is not here. And they didn't do anything? The most urgent thing now is to find Lin Qianqing. The voice in the ear disappeared for a moment. Is he really still alive? Shafei can't give herself to the Federation without any way out. As I said before, the follower who is most likely to avoid the Federation's attack and hide is Mozilla. And this way out is nothing more than what she has been studying. But how can you be sure that Lin Qianqing is the backup? We've come this far. Why do you still have so many questions? Since you're here to save him, then I believe Mozilla wants to run away. What? What? Gu Wanzhou was confused by her sudden change of topic and didn't react for a while. Locate his spaceship. If I don't stop it, blow up the Federation's invisible air defense chain. Okay. Gu Wanzhou knew what she meant. If the rescue on the ground fails, then the unrest here will ferment quickly. The worst case scenario is Lin Qianqing showing off. Failed. Shafei successfully transferred his consciousness to occupy his body. So no matter what, this time he couldn't let her run away again. Nor could he give her any time to react. Detecting underground activities doesn't necessarily mean that Mozilla has succeeded. Chen Weimo calmed down. Shafei must have some kind of connection with Mozilla. Su Xiaoxiao, who is also a spiritual body, once revealed that when one soul is dim, the other can feel it. Not to mention that Shafei is a person who specializes in spiritual research. She will not just treat Mozilla as an ordinary subordinate. According to this assumption, after she killed Shafei, Mozilla should have acted synchronously. But Lin Qianqing was different. He should have been preserved completely, like a dusty object, and it would take time to awaken him. At this point, Chen Weimon no longer had to hide. She rushed into the so-called hidden underground base with great force. The automatic defense system of the passage was instantly activated and bombarded her alone. She didn't have many energy shields on her body, and she had to leave a few for Lin Qianqing. She could only barely support the rapid passage, and she didn't even have time to completely destroy it. But the structure here was not complicated, and there were not many rooms. At the end, a window reflected a faint light. The door was destroyed, and she stood at the door, watching Mozilla connect the line to the back of Lin Qianqing's head. Chapter 191. Your little sister is really clingy. And the most annoying thing is that I can't do anything to her. Mozilla quickly adjusted the parameters. From Chen Weimo's perspective, the light reflected on his face flickered a few times and then stabilized. Anyway, you can't run away under my nose. So why bother? Chen Weimo's eyes wandered between the two of them, and he pulled out a weapon from the space device. Then why don't you just destroy this body? Mozilla laughed. His tone was bright, but suddenly it took a sharp turn. Like a sharp blade. Extremely cold. Just like before. Just kill your own friends. Sha Fei's body is dead, and the copies of his consciousness stored in various places will be dug out. You have failed, and you will not have another chance. Chen Weimo was unmoved. Really? You are noble again. Mozilla raised her head and glanced at her with her face tilted. Justice will eventually defeat evil, and justice will eventually be defined by you. This is another event worthy of praise. No one will fulfill your obsession for you. This is the end. Of course, you could also find someone else and help a madman who doesn't take human life seriously. Mozilla then turned sideways to look at her, but still had one hand on the side of the lying Lin Qianqing. With a playful tone, so, you short-lived ghosts. What qualifications do you have to stop me? And what are you? Chen Weimo's mouth sank for a moment. What justice and evil? So high-minded. All pinned on me. I don't have so many ideas. Sha Fei controls me and uses me. Then I just want her to die. On all levels. Mozilla thought. Then you should be able to understand me. Su Xiaoxiao gradually appeared beside her. She exchanged a glance with Chen Weimo, which was not a sign of relaxation. Mozilla suddenly smiled softly. You and Lin Qianqing were playing such an obvious trick, but you still had to get close to us and act a little sincere. That's good. You and Shaifai are of the same race, so it's most convenient to use them. The light on the screen suddenly lit up, and he unplugged the line from Lin Qianqing's body, speaking in a low voice, with a matter-of-fact look in his eyes. Anyway, thank you for sending me your body. The people on the stage were quiet and motionless. Chen Weimo lowered his arms and stared at him. Although human consciousness is low level, it is precisely because it is at a low evolutionary level that it is more likely to change. Maybe it will go a different path from mine. At least now, their consciousness can interact with matter. Isn't this very interesting? Mozilla took a few steps back with expectation. But before he could completely get away, he was splashed with warm liquid. Lin Qianqing suddenly raised his upper body and vomited a large pool of blood. If you look closely, you can see that his facial features are more or less oozing blood. He fell back again, lying on the platform and breathing in the air in big gulps, as if that was his only lifeline. Lin Qianqing? Mozilla called him uncertainly. It's not Shaifai. It doesn't look like it. The consciousness in this body is very chaotic, with familiar parts and unfamiliar parts. He realized very early that there have always been two consciousnesses in Lin Qianqing's body. One is the form of a federal man, and the other is the tail that only occasionally appeared on Lin Qianqing before. He didn't know who it was, but it didn't matter. Lin Qianqing was just a high-quality consciousness carrier that Shaifai had chosen. Except for Mengliji, no one in the Federation had a mental power that could surpass Shaifai. In this case, there was no need to worry about other people appearing. But now, this mixed consciousness was gradually becoming clear, and the part of Lin Qianqing was taking the lead. He felt that Chen Weimo had obviously relaxed at an inappropriate time. But Chen Weimo still stood calmly at the door. And it was Su Xiaoxiao who went forward to check on Lin Qianqing's condition. Maybe you can continue to activate Sha Fei's consciousness everywhere. Let her escape and survive with the help of various people. But as long as I find out, I will definitely stop it. Chen Weimo looked at Mozilla. If you think this is also a kind of fun, then I have nothing to say. And I can't change your mind. I just want you to know my attitude. On your road to pursuing the ultimate spirit, I must be the most difficult obstacle. Mozilla looked at Lin Qianqing, not knowing what she was thinking, and suddenly shrugged. I won't force it. You go. The sudden reassurance caught Chen Weimo off guard. She observed Mozilla's reaction, thinking that he still had a backup plan, but also thinking that she was overreacting, and that a spiritual body would not pose any real threat to her. For the last time, I won't bother you again, Mozilla said easily. Xia Fei. I have done my best. She can't calculate the changes in people's hearts in a huge organization. Nor can she calculate things other than interests. He stared into Chen Weimo's eyes. The universe is so big and has existed for so long that I can't remember the last thing I was interested in. Xia Fei is just a last resort. She treated me as a last resort. But she had already lost. Crazy. Chen Weimo was too lazy to pay attention to him, and just signaled Su Xiaoxiao to let her carry Lin Qianqing and go first. Lin Qianqing was now in a useless state, although his eyes were open and his legs could keep up with a few steps. He was like a walking corpse, and his reaction to the outside world was always very slow and weak. Su Xiaoxiao led him all the way smoothly and found the aircraft that Chen Weimo had told her had been prepared. They could leave here by turning on the stealth mode, but they could only rely on force to break through the Federation's barrier deployment in the air. With Gu Wanzhou's support, there should be no problem getting out. But they were not with Chen Weimo. Until Chen Weimo left that place, Mozilla really did not stop him. Although she felt that what Mozilla said was a bit strange. She couldn't tell what was wrong. Time waits for no one. She had no time to study, and moved quickly in the opposite direction of Su Shushu's escape, aiming at another secretly parked aircraft. Everything was ready, and after seeing the small sparks blooming in the distant sky and expanding in circles, she officially started the aircraft. The Federation's combat ships and mechas rushed towards the only unstable factor in the sky one after another, and Chen Weimo would take the initiative to become the second one. She quickly passed by at low altitude and dropped several bombs on the route of her movement trajectory. The flames of the explosion instantly tore through the quiet air and attracted the attention of the Federation. As expected, the number of light spots on the monitoring screen increased rapidly, and several combat ships rushed towards her from all directions. She began to break through the barrier at full speed. There were several light spots chasing after her. Just as Morua said, he would pursue mercilessly and destroy part of the structure of the attacker's ship. But in the end, the battle failed because the opponent was fully prepared. However, this fighting power doesn't look like it. Several pieces of the outer wall of Chen Weimo's spacecraft have fallen off. She did not underestimate the enemy because she was let off. Many Federal soldiers, who originally surrounded Su Xiaoxiao's aircraft, turned around and focused on her. Marrero. Chen Weimo sneered in her heart and accelerated the operation of her hands. The hole caused by Su Xiaoxiao was gradually shrinking, and she didn't have much time. She stared at the real-time data displayed on the screen. The speed of the aircraft had been pushed to the limit by her, and the roar of the engine filled the cabin. The pursuers behind her were relentless. Their firepower was as dense as a dense net covering the sky, trying to force her into a desperate situation. She suddenly pulled the joystick, and the spaceship suddenly dived down, narrowly avoiding several attacks. There was a violent explosion behind her, and she could even see from the rearview screen that a pursuing spaceship failed to dodge and hit her own people. This was not like the fighting style of the Federation. Fierce and reckless. Without time to think about it, she threw the last few spare jamming bombs behind her. The light of the explosion instantly filled her vision, and the light spots on the screen fell into chaos and even disappeared. Seizing this brief gap, she suddenly increased the speed of the spacecraft to the limit again and rushed straight into the hole. The moment the spacecraft passed through the barrier, the wing collided with the rapidly reshaped iron wall in the air, and the entire blasting spacecraft exploded violently, with flames all over the sky and metal fragments falling like meteors. Moero was in the command room far away, seeing the real-time images sent back, and suddenly his brain was absent-minded for a moment. Looking at the screen again, he actually felt that this scene was a bit unfamiliar. The spaceship Chen Weimo was on was blown up, and he was the one who issued the overwhelming interception order. The scene in a short period of time was not very real until he sorted out all the cause and effect chains in front of him, and Morua was sure what happened. How could this happen? How is Mengleji? He asked his subordinates. It has only been a few minutes since Chen Weimo made the noise. The colonel is in a coma, and Shafai is dead. The soldier looked embarrassed. Colonel, someone found us and said, surrender? Who? He said his name is Mozilla. Chapter 192. The sky was a soft light purple, with a few silver rays occasionally breaking through the clouds. The vast farmland stretched as far as the eye could see, with ridges neatly arranged, which were carefully measured and drawn. There were automatic seeding machines shuttling back and forth in the fields, and the long mechanical arms accurately inserted the seeds into the soil one by one. The surface of the soil was shimmering, changing color regularly. Looking along the ridge to the end, on the hillside not far away, several huge star beasts were lying quietly on the grass, looking at the farmland with gentle eyes. However, Gu Wenzhou's anger broke the tranquility here. He walked quickly towards the transparent house embedded in the ground, and brought up the light screen as he walked. It was densely packed with bleak financial data. Chen Weimao, keep your voice down, or you wake up the winged crystal beasts. They won't produce crystal energy if they don't get enough sleep. Chen Weimao lazily lay on the sofa, enjoying the light coming through the skylight, squinting his eyes and not moving. I just went out for a research trip. Just a few days, and you lost 200,000 star coins? Gu Wenzhou waved his hand in front of her eyes, but she obviously didn't want to face it. We are an agricultural company. A company. We need to make a profit. You took my money and gave it all to charity? You take money too seriously, Chen Weimao said earnestly, forcing Gu Wenzhou's hand down. At least our reputation has been established, which is a good thing. What's the use of having a reputation without money? Pay attention to your quality. Gu Wenzhou knew it was useless to talk to her. This guy was stubborn and would not listen to anything. He would wander around all day and give free relief when he had nothing to do. It's a poor planet. You can give some things, but why did you give seeds? It's better to teach a man how to fish than to give him a fish. That's the core competitiveness. Hey, I have a headache. Hey, let's talk later. Chen Weimao suddenly frowned, rubbed his temples, stood up, and walked into the house. Wait, what are you doing? Until Chen Weimao entered the house, Gu Wenzhou hadn't said a complete sentence. You really believe it? You can see it's fake. Lin Qianqing slowly walked down from the corner of the stairs, holding a cup of hot tea. Such poor acting skills can't only deceive you, right? The sequelae from 3 years ago are real. But if it really hurts, how could she show it? Lin Qianqing glanced at the data on the light screen and laughed. After living a rich life for a long time, it is really difficult and hard to calculate every penny. You still have the nerve to say sarcastic things. Why don't you control her? I only take care of the production of nutrient solution, and the things outside are your responsibility. Gu Wenzhou felt that it was very annoying to communicate with these two people, so he gave up. At worst, he can tighten his belt, save some costs, and expand some new channels. In 3 years, large and small organizations in the interstellar space have risen and fallen. But a strange company called 123 Agriculture has inexplicably gained a foothold, although it only buys and sells food and nutrient solution. It stands out because of its pure natural form of symbiosis between star beasts and plants. The most puzzling thing is that everyone who has been here has found that there is indeed no labor model that exploits star beasts here. Although it is not a star beast that can be raised artificially, it is very obedient, which is enough to make many people wary. As the rumor spread, it became that the people in this agricultural company are strong enough to control star beasts. After all, this is a world where strength is supreme. Even if someone comes to harass, they will either fail in front of the defense deployment outside the planet, or fall to the ground and never return. Gradually, people all know that this place cannot be easily provoked. But it is also stable enough to be a target for trading. Only they know that some star beasts, who bully the weak and fear the strong, will be very obedient and docile when they perceive creatures stronger than them. Therefore, these star beasts will honestly use the substances they secrete to react with plants and soil, which is the so-called cultivation. The land will give back enough food to the star beasts. Such a comfortable environment is much safer than the outside world, so they will not run away naturally. On this basis, the 3 of them are enough. Chen Weimao is in charge of crops and star beasts. Lin Qianqing is in charge of nutrient solution, and Gu Wenzhou is in charge of money. But money cannot only go out without income. Almost all the business is developed by Gu Wenzhou. Thinking of this, he felt cold again and started searching immediately. Lin Qianqing drank tea leisurely, looking at the anxious Gu Wenzhou, and suddenly said, I still haven't figured it out. You actually do business with her. It's been so long, and you're still curious about this. Gu Wenzhou was speechless, without even raising his head. People need to have food to eat, And it's better to have some common currency in hand. And people have to admit their mistakes. And a few words can't make it up. Oh, Lin Qianqing responded thoughtfully. I leave first. Gu Wenzhou didn't even have time to sit down and rest. And he had to leave again. Wait a minute. Lin Qianqing stopped him, walked up to him, and signaled him to come out and talk. Did you hear any news about the Federation when you went out this time? Gu Wenzhou looked back at the house, then retracted his gaze. It is said that Governor Ming was assassinated 3 days after he took office. The news has been blocked so far, and his life or death is unknown. What do you think? What does it have to do with me? I am a businessman, and the Federation is not within my scope of cooperation. He came here a few days before he took office. Like a thunderclap, Gu Wenzhou immediately looked inside the house again, feeling quite guilty. But he felt that Lin Qianqing's words were wrong. She didn't know about this? Coincidentally, she was not at home that day. She went out to look for star beasts. Then what? Then, Mengleji said that if he got into trouble, let Chen Weimao go to 3FOU98. Lin Qianqing, you are lacking in virtue. Gu Wenzhou immediately turned on the optical computer, which contained a lot of information from the Federation, which was organized in great detail. Mengleji was promoted from honorary colonel to governor in just 3 years. This speed was not normal. In addition, he has always advocated the decoupling of military and political affairs, which is essentially not controlled by medicine and energy. Therefore, he has experienced many accidents of varying sizes during this period. Before the incident, he publicly went to the energy zone controlled by the military region. And then, there was no activity. But after the incident, the energy zone announced a defect in the old technology, which has been widely discussed in the Federation in recent days. Discussion? Yes. It is only the public discussion, and no clear response has been given by all parties yet. Gu Wenzhou pinched the light brain with his fingers and whispered, "This rhythm? Don't you look familiar?" He quickly opened other interfaces. I seem to have heard of the place name you mentioned. Here, the independent military district has set up a test area, where many foreigners, docile star beasts, and ordinary federal residents live together without any restrictions on authority. This matter also caused a big stir in the Federation. At the beginning, almost everyone opposed it. At that time, only soldiers could go first, and then people volunteered to go intermittently. You also said that the Federation's affairs have nothing to do with you. Isn't this a very clear investigation? Uh-huh. Then why are you asking me? I advise you not to intercept other people's information casually. How do you know that they have no contact in the past 3 years? Lin Qianqing looked up at the sky. Although it was boundless, he knew that there were 2 strict air barriers there. There is a spaceship that often hovers in the sky above here, but never comes down. It is not a partner of the company. Lin Qianqing ignored Gu Wenzhou's surprise and continued, Chen Weimao is now in the Federation. Even if he is not dead, he is a wanted person. Besides, there is no explanation for the Moru incident. Who do you think can trust who now? There was silence for a while. Gu Wenzhou stared at Lin Qianqing's expression and sighed. Don't meddle in other people's affairs. It's better to get more sleep to nourish your brain. I will cover up this matter for you, and I won't care about it in the future. After saying that, he turned and went back into the house. Lin Qianqing did not stop him. He still took the cup of tea that was no longer steaming and took a sip. The message has been delivered. Governor Ming, he muttered to himself. Chapter 193. The light in the ward was very soft. Mengleji leaned against the bedside, his face pale, but he still tirelessly looked at the endless documents. Governor, it's time to rest. The door opened gently, and a young doctor stood at the door, patiently reminding, I know. It will be soon. 2 hours ago, our conversation was the same. Mengleji raised his head and smiled at him. Dr. Jizhong is too serious. Doctors have doctors' responsibilities, and patients should also have patients' awareness. The doctor named Jizhong walked to the bed with an expressionless face and looked at the physical data. The governor escaped death, so he shouldn't be so energetic. He is in good physical condition. I don't mean to praise the governor. I will go to sleep after I deal with this matter. Jizhong pressed down his eyes that were about to roll up, took out a small bottle of supplement from the medical box, and pushed the liquid into Mengleji's medicine without saying a word. Mengleji didn't react at first. His fingers paused slightly. His eyes flickered, and quickly fixed on a corner of the room. But at the same time, Dr. Jijong flew over his bed in an elegant parabola. Unconscious. Meng Liji realized the attacker belatedly, but could only watch, with only a trace of astonishment left after a brief moment of confusion. Chen Weimo retracted his kicking leg and immediately attacked the infusion tube connected to Meng Liji's body. Wait a minute. Meng Liji grabbed her wrist and finally remembered to stop the agile person in front of him. It's okay. I saw him add something to the medicine. Chen Weimo pushed his hand away and continued to check without distraction. I know. Chen Weimo stopped his action with a little doubt and glanced at the man lying on the ground. His last name is Qiu Xiang's. His younger brother. Someone did want to put something in my body, but in fact, they only put some small parts for defense. Meng Liji covered the hose on his body carefully. It's better not to move these things. If you move them, people outside will know. After staring at each other for 2 seconds, the two of them looked away at the same time. And the scene was quiet and a little weird. What did you ask me to do? Chen Weimo spoke first. What I said to Lin Qinqing was that if I died, you would come again. Not Gu Wanzhou. Chen Weimo's voice gradually weakened, and suddenly pursed her lips. If it's okay, I leave first. She took a step back, but was quickly pulled back by a pair of hands, and pressed tightly into a warm embrace. The sounds around seemed to suddenly stop, leaving only the sound of each other's breathing, gently echoing in the quiet air. I didn't intend to look for you. I just passed by. Somehow I went down. Meng Liji's Adam's apple moved slightly, making her ears itch. You pass by every few days? Don't you also appear next to my fleet for no reason? Meng Liji tightened his arms again. The wounds on his body were swollen and painful, but he didn't want to let go. 3 years. 3 years since we last met. Chen Weimo's upright body stiffened. She herself didn't even feel that it had been that long. Under the pretext of going out to search for star beasts, she always unconsciously found Meng Liji's public information, wandered around him alone, and even encountered several groups of people who were also secretly trying to assassinate him. She often looked up at the sky while farming, although she couldn't see anything with her naked eyes. Her defense layer warned her that there was someone she wanted to see but didn't dare to see. 3 years ago on Field Star, she was possessed by some strange idea, thinking that it was the last time anyway. So she messed up the situation completely, blew up Qi Yishuan's house, created the illusion that she and Shibo had fallen out, and then let the two of them escape from the underground passage to deal with the chaos behind, killed Sha Fei, knocked Meng Liji unconscious, and took all the responsibility on herself. Although there was a small problem in the Morwald link, Chen Weimon no longer cared and was not interested in figuring it out. She just wanted to escape. Escape to a place without free technology and without the Federation. She had never figured it out, whether it was her memory or her past. Maybe she really had the experience of serving as a soldier on a poor planet. Or maybe it was just a nail made by free technology to drive into the Federation. It was hard to tell whether it was true or false. And she didn't want to think about it. She never said it. But this kind of life was very tiring. And she didn't know whether her behavior was what she really wanted to do. It is useless to dwell on the muddled past. Those who were good to her, one by one, died or became disabled. She had no ideals, but had to watch the few people who were connected to her short life give up their personal preferences and turn to a greater mission. Should she follow? According to common sense, she should not abandon those who love her. She is seen as powerful and a good helper, but she doesn't want to, and doesn't dare to. Maybe she deserves a period of time of her own? Even if it's just to go to a deserted place, do nothing, lie down and bask in the sun. Maybe being a coward is the best for her. But now, maybe she should make it clear. These 3 years. I haven't been happy in these 3 years. Meng Liji spoke first, and her heart was choked. Those people are greedy, and the way they hold power is disgusting. I have to deal with them and bite and rob like a wild dog. Meng Liji held her shoulders with both hands, freed from the hug, lowered his head and smiled bitterly. I'm very tired. I always have to be on guard. There are too many open and hidden arrows to count. Sometimes I wish you were by my side, even if it's just to sit side by side for a while without talking. He stared into Chen Weima's eyes, but he didn't complain at all, only smiled. But I know that Chen Weima has her own life, and her life shouldn't include the Federation. She has done enough. Too much. She should do things that make her laugh. And she looks good when she laughs. When I think of this, I will sneak out to see you. What did you see? I saw you holding the seedlings, squatting in the field, pretending to work but actually slacking off and dozing off, and ended up getting whipped by the star beast. Is that me? Chen Weimao lowered his head guiltily, looking away. His throat tightened and soured for the first time in a long time, and his head began to ache. But I was also wronged. I was knocked unconscious and thrown aside. And we haven't seen each other for 3 years. Meng Liji suddenly turned around, tilted his head to find her eyes. I want to make amends. Promise me one thing. What? I hope that we can throw away all the guilt in our hearts and live uprightly. Chen Weimao's chest was muffled. She suddenly buried her head in Meng Liji's neck, and her whole body couldn't stop trembling slightly. I have a headache. Meng Liji hugged her without saying a word. Hugged her a little tightly. And his Adam's apple sank. Now his mental power is like a trickle, without any strong destruction. Just winding and shuttling. He stayed like this for a long time. Lin Qianqing said that you were injured on Field Star 3 years ago. It's nothing. Lin Qianqing and I are the same. Just sleep more if nothing happens. Chen Weimao's neuralgia was relieved a lot. And now she just wanted to cover up this matter bluntly. She suddenly remembered that there was another person on the ground. This doctor. Why hasn't he woken up yet? She stood up from the embrace and suddenly saw the blood oozing from Meng Liji's clothes. It's okay. Don't disturb others at night. Meng Liji gently held her down and didn't let her try to kick the unconscious Qiu Jizhong awake. Let Oji come and deal with it. Don't worry. Meng Liji was not in a good mood, but still held on. Mo Iro has always wanted to find you and explain what happened to you. He said that it was Mozilla who had affected the soldiers' consciousness and judgment on a large scale, making many people extremely angry. So they killed you one by one. When he came to his senses, it was too late. I guessed it. But it doesn't matter. Chen Weimao didn't care at all. She just wanted to know when Oji would come. It matters. Meng Liji refuted lightly. He thinks that in the final analysis, his mental strength is too weak. So he has been training hard for the past 3 years. I also think that he should pay a price for his weakness. He's fine. He's already a brigadier general. How weak can he be? Compared to me? Yes. Governor. Seeing Chen Weimao still staring at his wound, Meng Liji said again, I have another question. Where did you see Jizhong putting something in my medicine? In his room. What did you do in his room? To look through your medical records. Meng Liji was a little confused, and his tone became subtle. So you would rather read the written records than see a living person? Not really. I'm coming. Oji pushed the door open with his medicine box. But in a blink of an eye, there were 2 figures. He was stunned, and his throat was about to make a sharp explosion. But after seeing Meng Liji's gesture to silence him, he forced out a hoarse howl. Chen Weimao. I knew you were still alive. Help him deal with his wound first. Chen Weimao pushed him to the bedside to do his work, and watched closely from the side. How did you get in? When did you come? Why don't you come to me? What happened to Qiu Jizhong? Although Oji's hands did not stop working, his mouth was not idle. Your guards are like thieves. It's not difficult for me to come in. You're kidding. The governor's team is not that bad. I walked the assassination route several times. And I also killed some fellow travelers on this road. Otherwise you would have died several times. What? Meng Liji smiled bitterly. I guessed a little about this matter. Oji kept talking, his eyes wandering between the 2 of them. But he seemed to be getting more and more nervous. Yishuan also lives here. She has always wanted to see you. How about? No. Not today. Chen Weimao suddenly felt a little embarrassed. But when his eyes met Meng Liji's, the noise in his mind gradually faded away. If the few Vita beasts raised in Area 3 are always rioting and difficult to control, then release another Pteranodon. Oji didn't react. Although the Vita beasts can provide a lot of energy that foreigners need, they prefer cross-tribe communication. The hormones secreted by the Chingy leopard can calm them down. Chen Weimao opened the window. The night breeze was cool, and her hair was gently lifted. Wait until you really figure out how to let foreigners and star beasts live together. You're back? She chuckled. By then, I might come to coax 1 or 2 mature star beasts away. She leaned back slightly, leaving only a smile. And then she disappeared into the night. Oji took a slow step forward and a big step, sticking his head out. But he didn't find anyone. She is always more professional than us in doing this kind of thing. Mengleji was not panicked, but lowered his head and couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth. No. How did she know about the Vita Beast? Aren't the existence of some star beasts not yet public? Oh, she realized it later. But he also felt that none of this mattered. Why didn't she stay? The matter of Field Star has long been over. And there is nothing to worry about. And, right. He raised his chin slightly, but was embarrassed to be too straightforward. Mengleji's brows relaxed slightly, raised his head, and looked out the window. His eyes gentle and clear. We can't be bound. She is free.